Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first Crowdfight Symposium on the Science of Collaboration. This is María Hernández Sánchez from the core team of Crowdfight and a researcher from the Instituto de Investigación Biomédica de Salamanca, Spain. First of all, we would like to thank all of you for registering for this event. We are very happy since there are more than 300 people from different countries. This symposium is streaming on our YouTube channel, so everyone is welcome to join and you can share the link with your colleagues. For all the panelists and speakers, we very much appreciate your dedication to this event. We are going to do our best, even in this virtual format, to make this an event to remember. We have organized the symposium into 3 sessions. During session 1, we will explore the story, workflow, and future plans of the Crowdfight platform. Session 2 is time for our members, volunteers, and requesters who will show how Crowdfight has assisted them in their work and the impact that could have in their future projects. Finally, session 3 consists of a roundtable in which different experts will discuss about science collaboration and the culture of open science. As I have previously mentioned, we are now on YouTube, but we are glad to announce that this symposium will be recorded. So yes, it will be available for all of you on our channel after the event. Also, you can write at any time on the chat in YouTube. Ask any question that comes to your mind. Our moderators will be monitoring the chat at all times, and they will be either transmit the questions to the speakers or try to answer themselves. We encourage everyone to participate because we will be away Crowdfight mugs among those who write on the chat. We'll try to leave no question answered during the symposium, and we'll take note at all your comments and feedback. We are here hoping to learn from you as much as we can. By the way, we will open a Slack word page called Crowdfight Symposium, where you can ask further questions at the end of the event. And if there is not enough time for all the questions during the symposium, we will answer all of them in Slack, as well as we will post some of them on Twitter. So one reminder, our Twitter account is Crowdfight Team, and we are going to post during the symposium. So you can follow us, and if you also want to interact, please check out the hashtag of Crowdfight Symposium. Now, let's move to the first session, Crowdfight Story, Workflow, and Future Plans. Our first speaker is Sara Arganda, who is one of the co-founders of Crowdfight, and she is also a researcher from Universidad Rey Juan Carlos, Spain. Then, 4 of our members, Christian Gonzalez, Ana Morán, Marie Vasse, Sandrine Coquille, will explain to you their roles at Crowdfight, and they will explain the workflow of our platform. And finally, Alfonso Pérez, a co-founder of the platform and a researcher from Center for Integrative Biology in Toulouse, will show you our future plans and also answer the questions you may have. So let's go with our first speaker, Sara Arganda. You can start when you want.
Great. Thanks, Maria, for your introduction, for hosting this first session, and for all the work you have done to organize this symposium. Thank you very much. Hello to everyone, speakers and audience. I am very excited about this first Crowdfight Symposium on the science of collaboration, and I have many reasons for that. First of all, I love science. I love science, but I love collaboration. I really believe collaboration is in the heart of science. And when I use the word heart, I use it as a metaphor, but not for love, but for being that pump that allows all the parts of the body to be fed. And if you allow me to go a bit further, I also think collaboration is in the very basic of any human activity. Another reason for me to be excited about this symposium is to get the opportunity to spend this time with you discussing about this experience that we created, this initiative Crowdfight, from the point of view of the different actors and the different participants, and also discussing these interesting topics of science collaboration and open science. This is exciting, especially because more than 1 year ago, we could not imagine that this crazy idea that we had was actually going to work, to be useful, to last so long, and to continue evolving and expanding further than the current context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Before anything, I would like to define in a few words what's Crowdfight, at least for me, for those that might not know it. Crowdfight is a platform which aim is to promote scientific collaboration that might not happen without the right contact or network. This collaboration might be established at different levels. For example, it could be an expert answering a small question about a protocol, and sometimes that is very useful because otherwise we'll be stuck in our project. Also, it could be just helping someone obtaining a difficult reagent, or something more developed, like perform an important part on a bigger project. Our role is simply to find the best match between researchers and put them in contact. Crowdfight is run by volunteers, researchers, and it is free. So I've been asked to tell you a bit about the Crowdfight origins, about how all this started. And this is because, as we have already told in other occasions, this started as a conversation among friends. At the beginning of 2020, as many people, most people I would dare to say, we couldn't imagine that the whole world was going to be paralyzed. But it did. We saw ourselves having to stop experiment, to pack things at the lab for an undetermined period of time, to find new ways of trying to work with our teammates. But especially, I remember myself stressing out, packing stuff at my lab in empty corridor, leaving things ready, organizing how to keep the animals alive. I work with ants. And I felt that in all that context of almost a zombie apocalypse, the researchers actually working on pandemics, viruses, vaccines, etc., had an enormous responsibility on their shoulders. I also imagined that they were probably also feeling, and I think they had to, that they were doing something very important. And that all my stress, my preoccupations about my research were nothing in comparison to theirs. I remember talking about all these feelings with Alfonso, who will tell us more about the future of Crowdfight in this session, as Maria said. We discussed about how so many researchers with so many skills, even if they were not directly related to the fight against pandemics, were just going home, not being able to help. We wonder whether we were really incapable of helping a scientist. And that conversation was like a fast-growing seed in Alfonso's head, which I think had already a good ground to growing in. He said, wait, we have skills that might be useful for COVID-19 researchers. And if we are willing to help, many others might be, even for simple and repetitive tasks. The problem was how to organize that. The first thing to know was the needs of the COVID-19 researchers. The second, how to find the right person to help them with that. We discussed that this idea with another friend, another researcher, Daniel Caloy, who was working at the Max Planck Institute in Constance. Actually, he's working there, and he joined in the team. We decided that we needed a platform to put in contact COVID-19 researchers with volunteer scientists. And we call it, as you know, Crowdfight COVID-19. We thought it was something that was going probably to fail, but it was worth it to try. And Alfonso spent that night creating a webpage where known COVID researchers could offer their time and skill, and COVID researchers could ask for help for simple, or maybe not so simple tasks. And he did a great job. We had our first platform. Volunteers could fill a form with their skills, and researchers could write the request. We were very excited, but we were also very scared. So we decided that we would feel happy and rewarded if we could help at least one researcher. The first thing that we did after having the webpage was contacting our institutions and our scientific networks to ask them for spreading the word. One friend in one of our institutions, Rafael Jansson, Deputy Director of the CRCI in Toulouse, believed that the Crowdfight COVID-19 was a larger group of international researchers. And when he learned that it was still a small initiative, he laughed. And he decided to be as crazy as we were and be on board with us. That happened with many other friends. We also reached researchers we knew from other institutions and countries to be contact points. Their mission was sending information to their institutions and networks and replying to the press if needed. The response was amazing and a bit chaotic. A researcher that we didn't know contacted us to be contact points. In the first week, we received around 200 requests and 30,000 volunteers signed up. We had created a fantastic monster that required us to learn many things about management, and we soon realized that we needed more help. And we worried. We were very naive, but as we predicted, many people and many of our friends were extremely willing to help. Our team was growing with people with different skills, from infographic and design to molecular biology and to computer science. Actually, having a computer scientist in our team was fundamental. So if Santi is in the audience, thank you very much. If you're not, thank you very much anyway. At the beginning, we used Excel files to organize the request, assigning them manually a request number. We also had a file with the volunteers, and we realized that we needed to optimize our method to select them. Indeed, several of us from the team of Gonzalo García de Polavieja in the Champalimaud Institute started working on machine learning protocols to try to find the best match between researchers and requesters, with requesters from a researcher, non-COVID researcher and COVID researcher. And this is something that we are still working on. Anyway, soon we realized that we needed different organizational figures like receivers, request coordinators, scientific advisors. Also an efficient way to manage requests, the volunteers. So in the end, we have learned so much. For example, we have learned how difficult it is to send an email to 30,000 volunteers without risking to be considered spam. Actually, our first try of using our platform was done at one of our institutions, and the IT thought we were spam. Sorry, guys, we were just learning. After the first week, we actually had to stop 48 hours to establish a new system to manage everything, to rethink our workflow, to find more collaborators. And it was amazing. We learned from a friend about Freshdesk, that is a platform to manage clients. And that actually they provide us with, if I remember correctly, 6-month free voucher. Gonzalo García de Polavieja introduced us to Slack, that we didn't know about that at this moment, and we use it now for communicating among us all the time. So we learned really a lot, and we faced several difficulties that we didn't expect it. For example, we needed to really understand the need of the requesters, or knowing how to filter the realistic requests that we could realistically help with or not. In summary, it has been a very fun process with many meetings to rethink the workflow, with windows full of posits, finding new ways to do things, looking for funding, which actually has allowed us to hire people and companies for management and advertisement. And now Crowdfight has evolved. It is not anymore, or not only, Crowdfight COVID-19. Now any researcher from any field might look for help using our platform. And we are very proud of it, because we have seen the great potential of this kind of scientific interactions. Since we started, we have received more than 400 requests, and we have recorded that we have been successfully helping in 120 of them. Some of them, we actually don't know exactly how they ended up, because we haven't been able to contact the researchers again, but some of them are still ongoing. And our plan is to continue with this work. But let's wait for the future, for which are our plans for the future, when Alfonso will give his talk. And while this is probably a too short summary about the history of our platform, please let me move on and introduce Christian Gonzalez, who will tell us more about our typical workflow, and who was our project manager for a few months, and now he continues as a volunteer in Crowdfight. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you, Sara. And thanks, Maria, also for organizing this, and thanks everyone for being here. My name is Christian Gonzalez. I'm based in Barcelona, and I joined Crowdfight as a project manager in September of last year. So as Sara mentioned, we want to now give you a bit of a glimpse of what happens backstage, how we process your requests. So it's our workflow. So our team at Crowdfight gets to work right after you click that submit button on the form. So once you do that, so the first thing that happens is a member of our team, whom we call the receiver, makes sure that we understand the request by asking further details or any clarifications. And the goal at this point is to formulate a concise question that we can forward to our Crowdfight volunteers. So at this stage, we are determining, can we help you, and if so, how can we make it as efficient as possible? After this is clear, we prepare the task distribution email, which you're probably all familiar with, and it contains the task distribution form. So this is the form that the volunteers use to express interest in a particular request, and also to describe their expertise as well. We then send this email out to a group of volunteers who we think are the most appropriate for this particular request. And we wait about 24 hours for responses. And once we have the response of our volunteers, we assign what we call an advisor to this request. And this advisor is responsible of selecting the volunteer that can best address the request. So as you can see, at every stage at Crowdfight, we try to find the right people, and we try to make it as efficient as possible, and really make it a constructive experience for everyone. So once we have the advisor selects the volunteer, we next assign a coordinator to this request, and the coordinator is tasked with connecting the volunteer with the requester into answering any additional questions, and at this point they become the main point of contact with the volunteer and Crowdfight. So so today we have a receiver, a coordinator, and an advisor. They've joined us today, and they will tell us a little bit about their experience at Crowdfight. So I would like now to introduce Ana Morán. She's a researcher at the Center for Integrative Biology in Toulouse, and she has worked as a receiver. So, hi, Ana.
Hello. So, hi, everybody. So, as Christian said, I'm a PhD student based in Toulouse, so at the south of France. I started working at Crowdfight 1 year ago, like in April 2020. 2020, yes. So I work at a receiver. So that means that when a researcher is looking for help and they send a form asking for help, I am the first person to get that request. So we have a platform called Freshdesk. Maybe some of you know it, maybe don't, but it's like a ticket platform. So I get the request with all the information that the scientific researcher gave me. So like his name, his institution, and maybe background information. So I get the request, and then I try to write a small summary of what he's asking for. So sometimes it's very easy to do because sometimes it's very clear. So I can just make a small summary, but sometimes it's a little bit harder because first I work in animal behavior. So I don't know anything about viruses and stuff like that. So sometimes I need to go to Google to try to understand what the person is telling me. And I try to make a summary, and sometimes the request is not very clear. So I need to ask for more information. If it's still not very clear for me, I can get in contact with our scientific advisors and coordinators. So we will find an expert in our team that will understand what the requester is asking for. And we realize that often our team understands better what the requester is asking for than themselves, because they are looking for help often it's something that they don't know a lot about. So I write a small summary, and when we all know that it is clear and it's understandable for everyone, we send it to our volunteers, and they can respond to our forms. I think that maybe we don't send all the requests we receive, because often I receive some requests that have that they are not really asking for something, they are more offering to help. That is something that happens a lot. So that kind of request, I don't send them, but I answer to the person. And sometimes while when a requester does a request, they find very fast someone else to help them. So that's why also we don't send those requests that already had an answer. I think that's all of how we work. Don't hesitate to ask some question if you want some more information. And if you have some requests, you can send them via our website, and I will be the one receiving them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. This is great. Next, we have Sandrine Coquille. She's a researcher at the University of Bayreuth, and she's been advisor here at Crowdfight.
Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation. So I'm Sandrine Coquille. I'm working at the University of Bayreuth. I'm a structural biologist. And I first joined the Crowdfight initiative as a volunteer during the first lockdown, so in March last year. And my previous postdoc was in virology, so it was for me an opportunity to continue working and have contact with science through this platform. So I really appreciate that. And then I would like to thank all the Crowdfight team for their confidence, because they proposed me then to become a scientific advisor for the platform. So the idea of this work is to do a first screening of all the answers of the volunteers, all the answers that the volunteers send for a specific request. And then in order to identify the best matches between the needs of the requester and the different expertise and experience background of the different volunteers. So the idea is then to write a little report to the coordinator and to suggest some volunteers that can actually collaborate with the requester. So I usually select one or two main volunteers. And in case the main volunteers are not available anymore, we also select some reserve volunteers, who can also contribute to the collaboration with the requesters. So what is very interesting in this work is to try to select different people from different backgrounds, from different stage of their career, also with different, we can select master students, PhD students, technicians, not only PI, and all of these people can contribute and collaborate for requests and with the requester. So it's in fact what motivated me to contribute to the Crowdfight initiative. It's first that science is at the center of the discussion, not competition between labs, but the science question. And also the fact that everybody at any stage of their career can contribute and actually work in collaboration with other scientists. And that they all can contribute according to their expertise, according to their level, according to their knowledges, and it's very important for me. Another thing which is very important is that through this collaborative platform, we can also speak about negative results that we never published, in fact, in science. But it's also a manner to, for example, if a requester needs some advices for a protocol, and it's possible to give advices or what doesn't work if someone has previous experience with this kind of assay or experiment. And it's also very useful because you can, in fact, save a lot of time in the optimization of an experimental design. So thank you very much for all, and I let the place for the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Sandrine. And last but not least, we have Marie Vasse. She's a researcher at the Institute of Integrative Biology at ETH in Zurich, and she's being a coordinator at Crowdfight.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm now working as a postdoc at the CNRS, postdoc life, right? I was at ETH until January, but now I'm at the CNRS in France. Like everyone, I joined COVID last year, first as a volunteer, then I also worked as a scientific advisor, and then as a coordinator. And my work is basically to build upon all the things that has been presenting before. So I take the nice report that is written by the scientific advisor, and I try to make up a plan that I'm going to send to the requester. And then I contact the requester by email, usually, and I explain the volunteer that the platform found for them, why we think that they are suitable and that would be useful for their request. And I ask them if they agree with our plans, or if they want to choose more volunteer, or if they want to add something to the request. If they agree, then I contact the selected volunteers to confirm that they are still available and still willing to help. And if they do, I send the first contact email, putting everyone together. And this is the best part for me. Like, this is really cool. When it works, when everyone is still present and still willing to help, it's really beautiful. I mean, it sounds very cheesy, but it's really what it is. Like, you really feel like people are willing to help, and they do it. Like, they really help each other. Once this is done, your work is basically to follow up. So you ask if the collaboration is going well, if the volunteers are still present, if the requester needs something else. Now there are a lot of sort of algorithms that help us with auto follow-up, sending regular emails, but I feel like it's always still cool to be in touch with the people you've been interacting with. And yeah, like you try to make sure that the project is moving forward in the right direction. You can also have the role of helping if there are some tensions or conflict, or if someone feels like their contribution is big enough to be considered as a collaboration, like a formal scientific collaboration. And if they want some support to interact with a requester for this, you can also be involved in this kind of exchange. And I mean, Sandrine already explained very well a lot of motivation that I think we all share. The only thing I'd like to add is that for me, Crowdfight is super useful for two things. First, I think it's highlighting something that is already present in academia, and it's the will to help. Like, people really want to help. It's not very often advertised because we see much more the outcome of competitive processes, like, oh, I got this grant, I got this position, all the things. But even if it's more invisible, I think helping is very present in academia. And Crowdfight really helped to highlight this. I think it was very clear in the first presentation, like suddenly, like there were so many volunteers, people were not expecting this to happen, but they were there. And the second thing is that Crowdfight is also acting as a catalyzer for this. It's really creating new opportunities to help, and is facilitating this very much. It's like this platform is helping a lot of people to make their help really concrete. And I really think this is awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie. And now I would like to introduce Alfonso Pérez-Escudero. He will answer some of your questions, and he will also tell us a little bit more about what's next for Crowdfight. Alfonso is currently a PI at the Center for Integrative Biology in Toulouse, and he's one of the co-founders of Crowdfight.
Thank you very much. So my job here is to tell you a little bit about the future plans of Crowdfight. But actually, I would like to focus more on why we have these future plans, why we think that it makes sense to evolve Crowdfight into something different than what it was originally. Because actually, even though Crowdfight looks the same in the surface, it's very different deep down. And I would like to start with something that for me was quite important, which is a conversation that I had many years ago with a colleague. This guy had done a PhD in a university, like many other people. And after that, he had gone into industry. So he was doing research, but at a private company. And he said something that made me think a lot about what is science and the way we do it, which was that one advantage that he saw in industry with respect to public research was that it felt like everyone was in the same boat. So in a company, the company competes ruthlessly with other companies, but inside the company, they are a team. And I realized that he was right, that in academia, we rarely have that impression. Even within the same research group, you have different PhD students with different projects, and we all get along, we all are all nice, but usually I have my project, I need to advance my project, and there is at least implicit competition between different researchers, even though we are friends, even though we are in the same group. For many years, I have been thinking about this. I think it is a problem. I think it makes science not only less enjoyable, but it makes science worse. And for many years, I thought it had no solution. It was just something that came from an inherent difference between academia and maybe the private sector, because of a problem of incentives, that in the end, I need to advance my career, I need to focus on my project. It's natural that we feel this competition. But the last year has been extremely revealing in that sense. It has been eye-opening for me. And this is not what we were trying to do, right? When we created Crowdfight, we wanted to help a few researchers fight coronavirus. But instead, or in addition to that, for me, what we found was that it's possible to make science in a different way. And to me, the realization was that the key factor that is preventing us from feeling that we're in the same boat, because we are in the same boat, right? We all want science to advance. We all want humanity to discover new stuff that can help us. The reason why we don't feel that way is not only about the incentives. It's about something else, which I think is complementarity. And to me, this was not at all obvious before we started Crowdfight. And actually, looking back, I see that when we designed the platform, we made 3 very important mistakes that fortunately had not big consequences, but we totally thought in the wrong way about Crowdfight. So the first mistake was that we thought it was going to be super inefficient. We said, okay, it makes sense. Even if we have many people, many volunteers doing a lot of work just to help a little bit one researcher who's working on COVID-19, it's worth it. We are in an emergency, we need to work that way. But actually what happened was the opposite. What happened was that in many cases, you had one volunteer who spent half an hour walking a researcher through a protocol that they knew very well. And this half an hour of a volunteer saved hours, days, or weeks of trial and error to the requester. And this completely changed at least my understanding of the situation, because here you are adding a huge amount of value. And this is extremely important because both from the point of view, say, of a funder who needs to say, okay, I will put my money to help this initiative. It's very important that we are really creating value, that we are taking half an hour of a person and turning it into 20 hours of another person, right? And also because it's extremely important for this person who's donating the half an hour to see that their effort is worth it. The second mistake that we made is what Anna already mentioned, that we thought that we had to understand the requests almost as well as the requester. And what actually happened in many cases is that we understood them even better than the requester. The requester maybe was a molecular biologist and he needed a computer scientist. And of course, the molecular biologist will not know exactly what type of computer scientist they want or what is the brand of the software that they will need to use. But in our team, we do have a molecular biologist and a computer scientist. They can talk to each other and they can figure out exactly what this person needs. And this, again, creates a lot of added value because, again, this makes connections that would not be possible. Even if you had the requester in a room with all possible scientists and the ability to talk to them, it would not be possible to find the right match. And the third mistake that we make, which is probably the most important one, is that we thought that the main motivation for people to join Crowdfight and to contribute to Crowdfight would be basically coronavirus. And that was a very big motivation, of course. But what we found, as Marie said, when a request ends, and it's beautiful, and everyone is extremely happy, the requester is extremely happy because they got some amazing help. And the volunteers usually are also extremely happy. And this is not because they feel they are contributing to one particular cause. That matters. I'm not saying it doesn't, but our impression is that what matters most is just to see how much you can help, which is something that feels completely different from our daily work. In our daily work, we are working always on the same projects, making very little progress because it's very hard. But then suddenly you take your skill and you make a huge progress in somebody else's project. That really feels great. That really gives you the impression that your effort is worth it. And that really gives this impression of we are together in this. I'm helping someone achieve something. So all this made us realize that the limiting factor to enhance collaboration in science, to make science more collaborative, is not so much the incentive, it's the opportunity to help effectively. And the keyword here is effective. Because what happens is that in your environment, your friends, usually all of them have the same skills as you do, or very similar. So it's really hard to find these connections that are really game-changing. So it's needed to have some way of connecting people who are very far away from each other, both geographically, but especially topically, to create these extremely rich collaborations. So our aim from now onwards is not to transform everything in science, not to make science completely different. It's just to take perhaps, say, 10% of the time that we spend in our competitive work, in our project, and put it in collaborative work, helping somebody else's project. And we believe, because these realizations we had in the last year, that this is possible, but I'm not gonna say it's easy. It's extremely hard. We have a lot of challenges, and actually I'm gonna explain a little bit the challenges that we're facing right now. So the first challenge is that to make this work, we need to be really efficient. We need to process the requests fast. We need to be faster than we are now. And we need to make the connections very well. We need to really find the right person for each request. I think we are doing this reasonably well, but we're still relying too much on sending many emails to many people. We need to get better at this, at selecting only the few people who are good candidates, and then refine afterwards, thanks to the advisor and the coordinator. So we really need to improve our workflow. As I think Sara mentioned before, right now our success rate is around 50%, where we are very careful with the word success. For us, success means that we really make a difference. In many cases, we make a connection that looks great, they actually interact, the volunteer was very well chosen, but in the end, the project doesn't pan out. This we count as failure, okay? It's not enough for us to try. So with this stringent success criterion, we are at 50% right now. We need to get better. And as I said, we need to get faster. Also, we need to distribute the work more efficiently. Right now, we are a core team of 10, 20 people, some coordinators, some advisors. We know that many of you would be happy to contribute more. We know that there are many people who would be happy to join as advisors, coordinators. This requires a lot of work from our side, improving our training system, improving our follow-up system. We're working on that so that we can engage better the community and we can use much better the resources that we have. We also need to create the right incentives for everyone to participate. And this, we think, comes through documenting everything very well. So every time, our idea is that every time someone contributes to Crowdfight, this will be documented somewhere and it can be publicly shown. We don't know whether people will appreciate this a lot or a little. This is for the community to decide, for the scientific community, I mean, in general. But it's important that it's documented, it's there, so then we can use it. And we really believe that this can work. Once something is made visible, then it starts having value. And finally, probably the biggest challenge, and that's why we're here, is to change the scientific culture. We're finding it surprisingly easy to, say, convince people to help us, to join as volunteers, to share their time. We're finding it surprisingly hard to convince people that they can ask for help. We are not used to it. And even I, right now, I find it weird. When I have a problem, I think I need to fix it myself. It's hard to tell people you can ask for help. It's quick, it's easy, it's free. Just go and you will probably find someone who can help. This is probably the most important challenge that we have right now, to convince people that it's okay to ask for help. So how can you help in the future if you like this mission? Of course, if you didn't, you should join us. You should go to crowdfight.org and you should join us. You can make a request. Even making a request helps because it allows us to test our system. Now, for the first time, you can make a donation. We have set up a system in the webpage. Many people were asking for this. Now you can go and you can donate some money, which, by the way, is very useful because all the work is right now done by people like us, volunteers who work for free. So even the little bit amount of money that we can get makes a very big difference. Something important, very important, and I'm sorry about this, be patient with us. We know that we don't communicate very effectively sometimes. We know that sometimes we send too many emails, sometimes we send too few. We know that many of the emails that you receive about tasks and other things are maybe not relevant for you. We are improving this, we are working hard to improve this. And it's important to understand that if you believe in the mission, at some point, you will get some emails that will be relevant for you. But it's important that in the meantime, you still pay attention to the emails that we send. And actually, it's important that you actually open the emails. This helps us to improve our reputation with email servers and not be considered spam. And finally, you can also give us feedback. It's very important. We are looking for ideas. We are looking to improve. So give us as much feedback as you can. As we said, we are going to open a Slack workspace where we can interact with the core team more directly. We also have our contact email, and we're very happy to get all the ideas. Also, please, right now, write in the chat any ideas, any comments, any questions. They are all extremely helpful. So to recapitulate, we believe that scientific culture can be changed, which is something I did not believe personally a year ago, but now we believe it. We believe that it's going to be very hard. We believe that the best way to go in that direction is by creating opportunities for people to help each other effectively. And this is what Crowdfight is doing. Thank you very much for the attention. And I think now we can go to answering some questions that people sent either during registration or right now in the chat.
Thank you so much, Alfonso, for the talk and for explaining us the future plans of the platform. Okay, so let's go with the questions. We will give some time for the participants to make questions on our chat YouTube. Okay, as we have received already some questions during the registration, let's go with these questions first, and then we will move to the others if there are some. Okay, so one question that we have received: how did the tension between decentralization and coordination evolve? What do you think?
Right, so actually this is something very central for us. What distinguishes us from other platforms, from forums, from many other resources that we have is decentralization. What we have is people like the coordinator and the advisor who are manually curating all the possible collaborators and choosing one or two who are really very adequate. The original idea of this design, and still the idea of the design, is to reduce the workload from the person making the request. So when you make a request, you are not going to need to choose yourself among many options. You will get a high quality response at the end. Still, while it's important to keep this centralization approach, the distributed approach is extremely powerful, because one of our main strengths is a community of people who are happy to contribute to this, and we should be using this community as much as we can. What we have done until now is to slice the work that we have in little pieces. Actually, for example, our original idea was to have the figure of the coordinator who would do everything, but then we realized that it was too much, and we split between advisor and coordinator. So now we can ask an advisor, okay, it would be something quick that you can do during your coffee break, and then in this way we can use people better. But actually, this is one of the big challenges that we have, to use a bit more the community, to invite more people to participate, and to create more roles in which we can distribute the work while keeping the centralized approach that I think is our main characteristic.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We have received some questions from the chat of YouTube. So one question is about, could you elaborate more on how the process of data validation takes place from all the information that Crowdfight receives?
So data validation, I guess we mean the data from, we don't exactly know what kind of data we're talking about, right?
I guess it means about all the data from requesters, volunteers.
Okay, cool. So, so first I would like to maybe make it clear, because there are different types of data in the whole process, right? There is the data about the research project itself. This data, we do not handle it. Usually what we do is we make a connection, and then all the interaction is between requester and volunteers. So we personally don't handle research information, at least in general. In some rare cases, maybe we do, but in general, we don't. Then the types of data that we have is a very big database of volunteers with their different skills, their different preferences. And this database, the most important or the most challenging job that we do is to select the people who are going to be adequate for a given request. We have tried many different things. We have used, as Sara mentioned, we have developed an artificial intelligence system that we were training over time to refine our targeting. But actually this system, on its own, we haven't made it work well enough yet. So what we do is, basically, we do it mostly by hand right now. We have a set of categories that we have been refining over time. And then for every request, we manually, usually it's the staff, it's not even the coordinator, decides what categories are going to be the most adequate ones. We have a dream of bringing back artificial intelligence. And actually, I think it's going to to be in the end a combination. I think artificial intelligence on its own, the thing is, it doesn't have enough information because the profile of every volunteer, well, this is a very big answer, but the profile of every volunteer does not have enough information. So what we will need to have is a hybrid between the artificial intelligence, perhaps doing the final sorting on a pre-sorted list with manual criteria.
Okay, good. Well, we are happy to receive any feedback about this from this person also by Slack. One question from Natasha Rossi asks about how exactly donations are going to help.
Great question. So right now, Crowdfight basically has a fixed cost, which is not very big, which is basically the web interface, the servers, the services that we use, all these. We get great discounts because we are a non-profit, but still we need to pay. This is a few €100 per month. It's not, it's that order of month. We have had, and we are still, we are looking for funding, like more serious funding to grow. But the basic baseline is this. When we didn't have funding, especially at the beginning, actually we had to pay this out of our pockets. It's not a lot, so we could even do that, but donations would help a lot to cover these costs. And actually, when you have an organization like Crowdfight where everything is done for free, it's funny how sometimes not having just a little bit of money can change things. For example, we were talking about going to a conference to present Crowdfight. The people from the conference are happy to pay for the trip, but there are some small things that they won't be able to pay. And then either the person who goes, besides going, has to pay for all of this from their pocket. But if we had just a little bit of money, we could pay for it. So all these little things can help it.
Okay, perfect. Another question from the chat. Do you have volunteers coming from industry? Have you seen collaborations between academic labs and industry labs?
Yes, absolutely. So we have both volunteers and requesters. And we have had, so we have had both. We have had volunteers who work in the industry, helping researchers, usually from public labs. And we have had some requests from private companies. Those we are careful to label them very clearly because we know that some volunteers prefer not to contribute to private companies. And actually, this is something that we have changed. At the beginning, because it was about coronavirus, we did accept these requests from private companies just like anything else because we consider that everyone is helping. Right now that we have expanded to other fields for requests that are not related to coronavirus, in principle, we are not accepting requests from private companies because we consider that we should be helping mostly science, which is publicly funded.
Okay. Okay, we received a great question that I think that we could discuss furthermore during the roundtable, but let's talk about it. How does this approach fit in the traditional funding on science? Especially in early career stages, the amount of time available to help other projects is limited. So what do you think about this?
Could you please repeat the question?
How does the platform, the Crowdfight, fit in the traditional funding of science?
So that's an excellent question. And I haven't given it a lot of thought. So we think that, right, because we have considered very often actually to somehow also help on the funding side of the projects. This was something that at the beginning seemed to make a lot of sense. And for example, we consider the possibility, we don't have money ourselves, as you know very well, but we consider the possibility of helping, for example, people set up a crowdfunding campaign for their projects, or even acting as some kind of betting institution where we could say, hey, we think this project looks great, and then this would help these people get funding somewhere else. We are not ruling these projects out, but I think we are realizing that they are perhaps right now a little bit outside of what we can do really well. So we are not planning to take on a funding role anytime soon. What I think will be important is the side of the incentives. What is very important for us is to create incentives for people to help each other and to document this activity. So I can see very well a future where the criteria for getting a grant or the criteria for getting a position include participation either in Crowdfight or in similar platforms that can arise. It's not that we need to be the only players, but include something, anything, please, besides being authors in papers, right? Which is basically the only thing that is counting right now. And this, I think, will have an impact in how funding is distributed. Because, by the way, just a comment, if you think about it, something which is extremely important, it's not quite funding, but something which is extremely important when a department is looking to hire a new professor or a new PI, is how willing and able this person is to help other people. Because within the department, what you want is someone who's helpful, right? And actually, I have a theory that the reason why right now they pay very little attention to this is not that they don't care about it, is that they don't have a way to evaluate it. It's very easy to count how many papers a researcher has published, but it's extremely, extremely complicated to to judge how helpful a person is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We received another question about when we ask volunteers to suggest people who could help with a request. Do you know how much have you been successful getting help from researchers who did not volunteer directly, and how could you follow up?
Can you please repeat the question again?
Yes, so it's about when we ask volunteers to suggest other people who could help to these requesters. So how much have you been successful getting help from researchers who did not volunteer directly?
Yeah, now I understand. So I would say very successful. And actually would like to connect this. So I would like to apologize to all our volunteers for the lack of feedback. Very often we have 10 volunteers who are extremely well suited for one task, and we need to select one, and we should, and actually we're working to improve that. What we should do is to write the others and say, hey, we read your recommendation, because really we do. We have all these advisors and coordinators who are doing a lot of great job and reading every single thing that you write in the task distribution forms. And we would like to say, you were great, you look great, but we just, in this case, we had to choose someone else. So I'm sorry for the lack of feedback. Something similar happens when you recommend someone else. Usually we give priority to someone who can directly help. But actually, in some cases, we don't have a direct link, and we go to these recommendations, and typically they work really well. We usually ask the volunteer to make the contact between the other researcher and ourselves, and usually it works. Even more, in some cases, we have contacted a researcher who was not even a contact of anyone. So we send an email out of the blue, and we say, hey, we are Crowdfight, can you help this person? And the response has been surprisingly good. In the cases where we have done this, people are very happy to help. They are not too, because we thought they don't know Crowdfight, they are just going to ignore us, but no, they answer, and they are usually very happy to help. They're asking me to clarify something that apparently I said wrong. Because we would not want to give the impression that we do not need a lot of money. So please donate a lot of money. So there are two different, basically, regimes. The baseline regime, in which basically Crowdfight can keep doing what it's doing. This baseline regime, thanks to our structure, in which we have a lot of volunteers and we do everything in our free time, basically, this baseline regime is extremely cheap. And this is the reason, I'm gonna be honest, this is the reason why small donations make a big difference, because for this baseline regime, even a little bit of money helps a lot. But of course, we have big plans. We are applying for grants, we are looking for foundations, and the idea is to grow Crowdfight. The idea is to hire people. We at some point we have had this kind of funding, and that's why we could hire Christian, who was the moderator of the session. So we are also we have also these ambitious plans, and actually I think there is a very good chance that a year from now or 2 years from now, Crowdfight has several people who are working full-time to organize the whole structure, and has actually a professional core inside it.
Okay, thank you so much, Alfonso, for your time to answer all the questions. Sorry about that, because we don't have time to answer and address all the questions that we received also during the registration. But we can continue the discussion on Slack, and we are happy to answer all the questions, or even if you have further questions, you can ask for the chat through the chat or through the Slack.
Yeah, so keep asking questions, we'll answer.
Yes. Okay, so we are going to finish the first session, and now we will move to the session 2.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this second session of the first Crowdfight Symposium. And in this session, some members of the Crowdfight community will share their experience using our platform. So first, I'd like to introduce Jarai Carter. She's joining us from the US, where she's a data scientist at John Deere and a lecturer at Columbia University. Welcome, Jarai.
Hi, how's it going?
Hi.
All right, so hi everyone. My name's Jarai Carter, and today I wanted to share a little bit about my experience with Crowdfight. So currently, like it was mentioned, I work at John Deere, so I'm a data scientist, and I work with big data, specifically in the product space for customers. And I'm also adjunct faculty at Columbia University, where I lecture courses in their Applied Analytics Master's degree program. And so as kind of, a regular practitioner, teacher, learner of analytics, and also just like a really avid user of social media, I'm always looking for interesting projects to get involved in. So, when the COVID-19 pandemic caused a shutdown of the United States in March of 2020, I started to spend more time on social media to see what was going on and to stay connected with others. And I ended up actually coming across a tweet on Twitter about the Crowdfight COVID-19 initiative. And so as someone who hadn't collaborated on any scientific, like international projects, research projects before, I thought this would be a really neat way to get involved with the scientific community and be productive in a situation where I felt like I couldn't do a whole lot. Simultaneously contributing towards understanding how the pandemic was affecting people. And so my educational background includes a bachelor's degree in crop sciences and a PhD in informatics. And I actually wrote my dissertation on how farmers use Facebook. And so, this is a little bit of a far stretch from COVID-19 research, but I'd hope that someone would have found that my data analytics skills could come in handy. And so luckily I was able to be selected for a really awesome project. So the research that I'm a volunteer for is request number 302A, which focused on analyzing Twitter data collected during the pandemic along COVID-19 health statistics to kind of understand a variety of factors, involved in how this pandemic was affecting people at that time. And there was a special focus in our group on Italy, which it was hit extremely hard. And so by monitoring and analyzing these, publicly shared thoughts in spaces like social media, we can help, the decision makers in the communities kind of mitigate crises like this as they arise. And so it turns out that my expertise in the areas of text analysis, statistics, and data visualization was a great set of skills for the team. And so the current research is run by the Center for Human Dynamics in the Mobile Age, which is located in the Department of Geography at San Diego State University. And Dr. Gabriela Fernández, who is adjunct faculty at San Diego State University, was the requester who actually reached out to me about this research and is also the principal investigator for this work. And since that first email in April of 2020 that I received from her, she's coordinated regular video calls for the team to get together, and we have a group chat going so we can stay connected asynchronously. And so this interdisciplinary team has been just super amazing to work with. There's, a variety of skills and talents to be able to collaborate with. And some of the technologies we use in our work include ArcGIS, Python, R, Tableau, alongside techniques like natural language processing and translation of Italian tweets to English, correlation analysis, and geospatial analysis. And so, the team is also made up of, faculty, staff, graduate students, postdoc scholars located all over the world, including European countries, Australia, and the United States. So currently we have one publication in its final stages, 2 publications in the revision stages. We have a book chapter in the works, and we've given multiple presentations, discussing the research at a variety of events, including San Diego State University's Student Research Symposium, Hubzine Italia, the United Nations Environmental Program, and the Climate Change Reality Project. The team also developed the Track It COVID-19 screening tool at SDSU, which monitors data on how citizens prepare and cope with the spreading of COVID-19. And the team also developed a SMART dashboard, which stands for Social Media Analytic and Research Testbed. And this is a geo-targeted search tool for Twitter to monitor diffusion of information and social behavior changes. So, this request had a really large positive impact on me for a variety of reasons. First, since the pandemic shut down, everything so suddenly with little warning, there was a lot of disconnect that happened, quickly socially, and kind of that feeling of helplessness. And so I thought this would be a really great way to, be proactive in a situation where I felt like I couldn't do a whole lot. And, second, as a young scholar myself, I'm still working on my personal growth in research, and this request was something that I just thought was super interesting, and it was in a space that I really enjoy, social media, and on a timely topic that would also help me build new research connections with others. And so it was awesome to know kind of these skills I developed while working on my dissertation could be applied to other research projects, and I could share my skills with other scholars. So, there's so much growth available when you collaborate with other researchers, especially outside of your, immediate colleagues or even your current university or industry, whether it's technically, theoretically, professionally. And so initiatives like Crowdfight are really important to bring that right set of people together with the right set of skills to really push forward that positive impact of scientific collaboration. So that added benefit of participating in research that is really important to you and connecting with others who feel the same can really increase the quality of the results of that research as well. So yeah, thank you for listening to my experience as a Crowdfight volunteer. And if you want to learn more about that research or what I do, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I can give you, all kinds of information to my team's on my team's research. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jarai. And up next, I'd like to introduce to you Vicent Parissi. He's a PI at the University of Bordeaux and has been a Crowdfight volunteer, both a volunteer and requester. So welcome, Vicent.
Good afternoon, everybody. I will just share my screen, if possible. And then here. Okay, can you see it? And can you hear me? I guess, yes. Okay, so thanks a lot for inviting me for this meeting. I will just start by introduce myself. So I'm working in a microbiology lab, and we are mainly interested in pathogenic genome mobility, including retroviruses, replication, and integration of the retroviral genome into the host genome. And when we met the COVID pandemic, we were working on different kind of models, including pathogens from humans, like retroviruses, bacterial, and eukaryotic and prokaryotic transposases. And we developed some models for biochemical assays, recapitulating the activity of the enzymes involved in this process, cell biology approaches, pharmacology approaches, and structural biology. So when the first lockdown came, what we wanted to do is to participate to the fight against COVID, of course, and to share the different models that we developed in the lab, focusing on the entry stage of the virus, which involves a complex between the virus spike protein and the ACE2 receptor from the cell. And the idea was to monitor and quantify the interaction and develop further system to select molecule able to disrupt the complex. So that's why we asked to the Crowdfight network, and we asked some requests. The first one was to get some material, biological material, to start the project. So we asked for expression plasmid, and Jesse Bloom from the FLENH answered to us and sent us all the plasmid required for the expression of the proteins. We started the expression of the protein. This led us to develop in few months different models for monitoring the association between the two proteins using biochemical approaches like Pearl-Down, AlphaScreen, Blitz, and also cellular systems like VAR infectivity assays and cellular interaction assay between the two proteins. So this led us to start a project for screening drugs against this complex. We started to start a virtual docking, asking a new request to Crowdfight, and Sergio Souza from Porto answered to us and developed an in vitro or in silico model to monitor the association between the two proteins, leading to monitoring, docking monitoring systems, and allowing him to identify druggable sites within the complex between the two proteins. So this allowed us to start virtual screening of molecules. So more than 70,000 molecules have been screened, led us to select less than 10 drugs, and finally 2 drugs that were able to inhibit the infectivity of the virus in different kinds of cells. We were ready to answer to new requests based on the different tools that we have developed, and we answered to several requests from the Crowdfight coming from different labs from Marseille, Bordeaux, but also Abidjan in Africa and also in Asia. And so lab asked us to test different kind of molecule using all the systems that have been developed. And this led to the identification of new drugs, and especially 2 that are currently under studies and were found to be able to block the entry stage of the virus in different kind of cell, including the naturally susceptible cell, pulmonary cells. So as you can see, and I hope I convince you that our interaction with the Crowdfight people led to a very efficient collaboration. In few months, less than 1 year, we were able to develop new tools thanks to the interaction with the different teams from Crowdfight. We selected drugs from about 70,000 initial compounds, and several manuscripts have been published or are under preparation. And more importantly, we have 1 or 2 patents under progress about those new molecules that can be efficient on the viral replication. We are currently answering to additional requests based on the model that we have developed thanks to Crowdfight interaction, especially for studying the entry stage of the viral replication, the role of protein, cellular protein in this stage, and also we are currently working on viral entry. We are fully ready to work with all the additional people that could be interested in the context of the new Crowdfight network. Again, thanks a lot. I just want to mention that in addition to new information about viral replication, we also increase our own collaborative network. Additional groups have joined us with very specific skills that were not available before in our team, like biophysics, but also in silico modelization, and of course, people that are experts in coronavirus replication analysis and study. So again, thanks a lot, and we are ready to answer to new requests based on our skills and expertise. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Vincent. Now I'd like to introduce Nila Naim. Nila is a senior scientist at AdGene, which is a non-profit plasmid repository. She's been a Crowdfight volunteer in the past. So welcome, Nila.
Hey, yep, it's actually Nyla Naim. So
Nyla.
As he said, no worries. Yeah, as he said, I'm a senior scientist at AdGene, and what does it mean to be a nonprofit biorepository? Basically, we're committed to helping researchers share reagents. So it was really cool to be able to, join Crowdfight and volunteer. I had heard about it just when, someone at work posted a message about it on our Slack channel saying that here's a list of COVID researchers. They were looking for volunteers, and I thought this would be pretty cool. I just joined the company, and I figured that even though I don't have much of a background in virology, that my knowledge and skill set in molecular biology ought to be good for something, especially during this time. And I really wanted, as we, started working from home, I've been working from home since March of 2020. I just wanted to do something to help contribute to ending this pandemic. And I figured I could do something with my scientific background, even if it was very small. So my current role at AdGene is actually helping researchers find information and making it accessible. So at the time, I was actually helping to work on pulling together this SARS-CoV-2 plasmid collection from different academic universities and biotech groups, and just put together this collection. So I joined the email serve, and in April of 2020, about 1 month on the American side, I saw request 518, where someone was looking for a SARS-CoV-2 DNA sequence, including some of the proteases from there. So I received an email from Maria after responding to it, and I got to talk to an early stage researcher in Belgium. I recommended some plasmids from the collection that had just been honestly just made available about 2 weeks in, and they ended up ordering 2 plasmids that were deposited by a Canadian researcher, Dr. Fitzroth, if you know who he is. He just built this flexible toolkit with the SARS-CoV-2 genome, and it was just, like I said, pretty hot off the press, fresh for us. His publication was still in the preprint stages at that time, like I said, only April. And so by talking with me, this researcher looking for DNA had reagents on their way the next week. So I thought that was pretty cool. Like I said, I'd only recently started this job. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known about this collection or anything like that to have been able to help. And someone who had never heard of AdGene now found us as a source for, reagents. And of course, the lab that built that very highly relevant, important collection now has a way to easily distribute it across the world. But my appreciation for this really grows over time. So sometimes we can't see the impact of the small actions we do until much later. And so the publication describing these constructs, it wasn't actually published until August of 2020. So, if the researcher had tried to find these reagents before, they would have had to either known about the lab, seen this, the announcements that they were making on Twitter or their lab page, or known about the preprint. And then the lab that designed the plasmid, it wasn't a traditional virology lab working on coronaviruses, but they had the capacity to design this toolkit quickly, and they wanted to share it, widely, across the world. So, the lab, to try and ship all those reagents out to hundreds of researchers, they would have also had to worry about sending biological reagents during a time when many shipping facilities were limited. So between, the researcher looking for DNA, the researcher that had it, our institution in the middle helping it, those 3 things wouldn't have overlapped nearly as quickly if it weren't for Crowdfight sort of serving as this really nice networking platform. Like I said, very well organized, very focused. It was nice to be able to volunteer on there and really pick what I could help out with, but also see which areas of specialty could what specialized area could I help contribute to and whatnot. So yeah, compared to other forums where if you've ever tried asking for help in the past, sometimes you ask your question out into the void and never get a response. Here it was really nice that you had a person on the other end that you could discuss with and sort of help set up these really well curated matches. I thought that was very cool. And like I said, very quick results for something that could have taken, months, let alone 1 week. So I think that community involvement was really critical here towards advancing research at that time. I really like open science, and so this was just a really nicely tied together story that we could help someone get reagents quickly. So thanks.
Naila, thank you very, very much. Antonio Fernández-Anta joins us now. He's a research professor at AMDEA Networks in Madrid, and he's the project head of the Corona Surveys project.
Hello, I guess you can see me. Let me share my screen. I guess you can see my screen now. So I'm essentially the coordinator of this project, and you have on the screen. It's called, we call it Corona Surveys. This is a project that started in March 2020, when the pandemic started. In particular, I'm from Spain, so I was seeing that the data that we had about the pandemic was not reliable. So we decided to start an initiative in order to get more reliable information about number of cases, number of fatalities, things like that. My background is not has nothing to do with this. This is me. I'm a research professor at India Networks. I essentially work on computer science. But we started in March, and in a few weeks we already had like a huge collection of people collaborating in our initiative. In particular, what is that we were using? We were using a survey in which we were asking people, how many people and how many people of those have COVID. We started doing this using Twitter. We moved to Google Forms, and then we found out that we had to use our own platform, among other things, for privacy issues. So we needed help to deploy this worldwide. Essentially, we started in March. In a month, we already had surveys being already deployed in several countries. Starting from Chile, Argentina, all the way to Greece, Germany, US. However, we wanted to do it globally, and for that we needed more languages, because essentially our survey was only available in those languages that the members of the team were able to speak, right? So for that, I don't remember exactly how, found out about Crowdfight, and I contacted them, and they helped us to make this survey and translate it to 60 different languages. I hope you can see my menu here. So right now, this survey, as I said, is available in 60 different languages, which is, for instance, right now very useful because we are trying to estimate what is happening in India. So we have it translated to several of Indian languages, and we, people are able to report, how many cases of COVID-19 they know in their own language. Something else that we got from Crowdfight was they put us in touch with an amazing web administrator who came up and developed this nice website that you see here, and has been on top of like many different things. Let me just very quickly show you the survey and what are the questions that we ask. Essentially, people report about their geographical area. They talk about how many people they know and how many people they know that have been diagnosed COVID-19, how many that are still sick, how many that have been sick in the latest 7 days. So with this data, we are able to estimate what is the evolution of COVID-19 in different countries. So for instance, this is the website. We are especially getting a lot of responses from Spain and Brazil, not so many from other countries. So we are kind of following the trend of what is happening, like this curve is for Madrid. As I said, we are estimating, we're using these results to estimate the prevalence of COVID-19 and the evolution. And I think this is pretty much it. Just if you have any question, please, I'm completely open for answering them. And if you have curiosity, just go to coronasurveys.org and let us know what you think about it. And if you have any feedback or any suggestion, we will be very happy.
Thank you very much, Antonio. And up next, we have Fran Romson. She's joining us today from the University of Bristol, where she is a senior research associate at the School of Biological Sciences. She's been a Crowdfight requester in the past. Welcome, Fran.
Hi, thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen, if I can find it. Yep, there it is. Okay, that everyone can hear me and can see my screen. The end. Second. There we are. Okay, I would like to talk to you about my experience as a volunteer on Crowdfight task 241E. So last spring, I think like many people, I found myself working from home for 3 months, while the life sciences department at Bristol University was closed to be made COVID secure so that we could return to work last summer. Now, I'm a very practical molecular biologist. I've been at postdoc forever, and I primarily work in the lab. So my boss, at the beginning of working from home, sent his research group this poster: Scientists Without a Lab, a researcher's guide to COVID-19, what to do while working from home, including obviously the usual tasks such as writing up one's lab book, reading papers, crunching data, and a number of other really useful tasks that myself and my colleagues got on with. But then one day on social media, a friend shared this page on Facebook: volunteer your time and skill. If you're a researcher not currently involved in COVID-19 research, you can help. And I thought, you know what? I'm sitting here at home. I'm a molecular biologist. This is something that I can do. So I sought permission from my boss, who very generously said that I could have all of the time that I needed to help out, which was great. So this is task 241E as it landed on my email inbox. I'll just summarize for you. Volunteers were needed to do a literature search and summarize on the proofreading mechanism of coronavirus, and research ideas including drug design were also welcome. So coronaviruses are tricky. They can resist antiviral nucleosides by carefully proofreading during RNA synthesis and literally just snipping them out. So the researcher involved wanted to know more about that molecular mechanism in order to help him design better drugs to fight COVID-19. So the requester was Wai-Lung Ng, also known as Billy, assistant professor in chemical biology and drug discovery at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. So he's a medical chemist designing small antiviral molecules, and he wanted molecular biology advice. So I was not the only volunteer. And in fact, what Billy decided to do, rather than just asking one scientist to put together a review into proofreading, he decided to ask a team of us, coordinated by me, and make it a really collaborative effort. So Billy was joined by his very talented research assistant, Khadija, in Hong Kong. And then we were also joined by Palma Roshi's lab in France, her PhD students, Clement Paris, and from Vietnam, Khan Lee. From Turkey, PhD student Sinem, who was also getting to grips with having to do online tutoring for her colleagues. And from the USA, Peter, who was normally working in France, but had found himself stuck in California when all flights were cancelled. So how did we go ahead? So fortunately, my partner, Rob, shown in a picture here, is a software engineer, which is very handy because I'm a molecular biologist, but I'm not very techy. And he suggested, okay, why don't you do this using Google Docs? Might sound simple to some of you, but I'd never used it myself. And it was absolutely brilliant because in real time, we could all edit, add comments, questions, answer questions, and also use an online reference manager paper pile, which again was brilliant because it didn't matter where we were in the world, what the time zone was. We could just put all of the references from our research into a central Dropbox. Everyone could access them, download them, read them, and then add them to the growing document. So we divided the document up into chunks, introduction, middle bit, techie bit at the end, and we all got going. We also used Skype a lot more than I had ever done before in my life, which was 0 times. And we had regular meetings. Because I was a coordinator, usually I would choose a very nice time for Bath, UK, where I live, at 10 in the morning. But that sometimes meant that poor Peter got the short straw and was Skyping with us at 3 a.m. This is just a screenshot of one of our meetings with just a few of the 8 participants. And I think we're probably trying to decide if we should give ourselves a deadline. So to cut a long story short, we put together all of our research and published our first review, Coronavirus RNA Proofreading, Molecular Basis and Therapeutic Targeting. And largely due to the ambition and determination of Billy, who was our requester, who would not take no for an answer and wanted this review to make it into one of the top journals as high as possible, we managed to publish this last September in Molecular Cell, which has got a really high impact factor. And as of today, we have Google Scholar citations up to 99. And as you can see from the matrix, there was a lot of interest on social media, something like over 140,000 shares, likes, and comments so far. So there were quite a few of us, and it became clear when we were writing the review that we actually had enough material for 2 reviews. And so we ended up publishing a second review, which just came out last month, again in a very high journal, thanks to the determination of Billy, Trends in Biochemical Sciences. And we published our review called Nucleic Acid-Based Technologies Targeting Coronaviruses. Things like antisense oligonucleotides, small interfering RNAs, CRISPR technology, and of course, something very current, messenger RNA vaccines. So this has only been out for officially just over a month, very high impact factor, and we've already got a few citations, and again, a lot of interest and shares on social media. Also, we were really fortunate in making the front cover of Trends in Biochemical Sciences last month, and that's because a friend of Palmer, an artist called Luigi Russo, put together this beautiful painting entitled Messenger RNA COVID-19 Vaccine, and it shows a robot unlocking the key to messenger RNA vaccines and handing it to a medic at the front line. So obviously all of this has been personally very satisfying, good for our CVs, and hopefully, especially for the younger researchers involved, the PhD students, great for their career. But the reason we obviously got involved was so that we could hopefully make a difference to the pandemic. And hopefully these 2 reviews will help people to navigate the frankly vast body of literature that's out there, both historic literature and current literature. And hopefully that will point them in the right direction to making some more breakthroughs. Finally, if I can just show you the graphical abstract from our first review, showing the proofreading mechanism in action of coronaviruses. This task has also resulted in a collaboration, which probably would never have happened if it weren't for COVID-19, in particular, if it weren't for Crowdfight. So Billy's lab in Hong Kong and Palmer's lab in Marseille, in France, the Cancer Research Institute there, are now collaborating going forwards. And I just had it from Palmer today that she's just designed and sent some antisense oligonucleotides to Billy's lab in Hong Kong to test in his system. So that's really good news. And thank you to the coordinators and for everyone for asking me to join you to speak today, and thanks for your attention.
Fran, thank you very, very much. And up next, we have some questions, and you'll hear the answers from our panel. Hi, welcome back, everyone. So the first question I have, it's actually split in two parts. So I think maybe we tackle it in two parts. And this is in general for all of you. So what makes a good Crowdfight collaborator from both points of view? So for regular collaborations, we probably have an idea of the characteristics of good collaborators, but interactions through Crowdfight are a bit different. So are there differences? Do you have any advice for future cases for do's and don'ts? So who would like to give us some input?
Well, I can try to give a kind of answer on the basis of my own experience and not only on the basis of my experience on Crowdfight. It's a more general answer in terms of collaboration. Because the best collaboration for me was when the collaborator meets the skill that I need, or invertedly when I ask for a skill that I don't own by myself. And usually it works quite very finely, because in that case you really need to have the expertise of your collaborator, and in that case it can be very efficient. That's on the basis of my experience. That's the case where the collaboration is going very finely.
Thank you very much. Anybody else has any further insight? Okay, so we'll move to the next question. This one is for Jarai and for Fran. Are you planning to keep working on COVID-19? More generally, do you think this experience will have an impact in your future research? So maybe you can start with Jarai.
Oh man, that's a fun one. I can't say for sure how long my engagement will last with my team. Hopefully a little while longer. But I would say that I don't see kind of indefinite research in this area, but I definitely think it's kind of opened up kind of my eyes to different types of projects that I can get involved in. And so while I don't think I'll probably keep focusing on COVID-19 specifically, you know, and kind of, you know, maybe a few years from now, certainly in the short term, it's still a focus of mine. And I think, you know, as far as kind of impacting kind of the future research side of things, I think, you know, part of my time will be spent trying to kind of get others involved in initiatives like this or projects like this in the future. And I think one thing I always try to stress to a lot of times to my colleagues who are like up and coming graduate students close to defending their dissertations, you know, you don't have to limit yourself to just what you've studied to make a difference in situations like this. So even though my focus was in agriculture, a lot of the tools and technologies I learned both at work and in grad studies can be applied to a lot of things. And so I think that's important too, is not just every person on the team was a scientist in, you know, the life sciences, but psychologists, linguists, computer scientists, that's all an important part. So.
Thank you very much, Fran.
Yeah, so I think I might have omitted to say that I'm actually a plant biologist. So my research, as well as working at a lab bench, I also work in the greenhouse and with plants every day. So I'm not a COVID researcher. The reason I got involved was because I work in the pathology department at Bristol University, and I'm also working on an RNA virus, but it happens to be a plant virus. And I work on an unusual protein that this plant virus seems to have acquired. which may have some kind of proofreading function. And that's really why this task sort of grabbed me, because yeah, it's medical research and I'm a plant biologist, but there were definite parallels, and that's really why I got involved. It's already helped my research. I've been back in the lab since last summer, back with my working on cassava, which is an African crop, and cassava brown streak virus, that the virus I'm particularly interested in, which is currently devastating parts of sub-Saharan Africa in a pandemic that's no less devastating to the people involved than the current COVID pandemic, because it leads to famine in some very politically difficult areas of the world. But it's the research that came out of researching the proofreading mechanism in particular has really helped me to look at my own virus, if you like, in a different way. Because I came into the lab as a plant physiologist, not even as a plant virologist. So the whole area of virology was new to me. So it's helped my current research. I will probably always be a plant biologist at heart. However, I believe that Billy is interested in writing more reviews, so I may end up helping out simply because it was a great collaboration, and myself and others in the team had different expertise to Billy. Obviously, he's a chemist and we're molecular biologists, and that's how we could help and look at the literature and trawl through the vast amount of literature to find the key ones. And that certainly would be something that I'd like to continue to do. And maybe we could apply similar principles of collaboration to my field of research as well.
Great, thank you very much. Next question is for both Vincent and Antonio. If Crowdfight had not existed, what alternatives would you have used to solve your requests? So let's start with Antonio.
Oh, thank you, Christian. Actually, that would have been really tough. I mean, as I said, essentially, I mean, there were two main contributions for Crowdfight for us. One was finding this wonderful web administrator, which was Julian Roberts. He's been helping a lot and putting a lot of time in the project. And the second, which would have been completely out of my turf, is translating our survey to so many different languages. You know, I just wouldn't know where to start. You know, essentially, I started with my network of contacts in Europe mostly, and we exhausted all the languages we knew. You know, French, Italian, Greek, and that was it. Then all of a sudden, I found this wonderful resource, which was by just contacting you guys, you were able to find in no time people that were willing to help us translate in so many different languages, some of which we could not really deploy because the platform we're using was not general enough and was not able to do it. But it was really, really amazing. I mean, my alternative would have been to reduce the scope, you know, like reduce the ambition, you know, stick to a few languages, you know, slowly use probably social network to call for volunteers personally. This was really, this would have been a really painful experience, I think.
Yeah, thank you very much. How about you, Vincent?
I think I have a similar answer to the question. The main aim for us to participate in Crowdfight was to try to, again, to find expertise and skills that we didn't have within the team. And we have our personal network, but which is very focused on retroviruses and a very specific field of biology. So we could have asked to our own collaborator to work with us and try to share some expertise. But again, it will have been very slower and very difficult, and we will have to change our milestone, because again, for example, the first in silico screening of drug has been started the first months of this lockdown in France, and without Crowdfight, I think we didn't get access to this skill during this time, and it would have been very difficult to even start the project and to get the result we have now. So there is no real good alternative to Crowdfight for us.
Great, thank you very much. Next question I have for Naila. It seems that Adgene reacted extremely well to the pandemic, being very quick to organize and distribute relevant plasmids. Did you have specific plans for this type of situations where things need to be done faster than usual?
Well, first of all, thanks. We worked really hard to make that turnaround happen. So yeah, this was definitely a bit of a surprise. We weren't necessarily prepared for the scope of this shutdown, but basically once it happened, you know, because we're a nonprofit, but we have a lot of like sort of, I guess, that biotech spirit. So a lot of people who are very willing to be flexible and turn things around and work quickly. So it was definitely a huge, like several teams working together to be able to contact academic labs that were working on coronaviruses, making collaborations with, you know, for example, a large part of our COVID collection is based on is from Ginkgo Bioworks, which is a you know, synthesis company, and so they were able to, you know, synthesize these on a rapid scale, and like the Roth lab that I mentioned before made things very quickly. So certainly the materials were made very quickly. The challenge for us was trying to process, you know, these thousands of plasmids during a time where we have only a limited number of people on site and limited, you know, connections. Luckily, our group was already very good at communicating through like virtual platforms. We'd already had Zoom for meetings. Part of that was, you know, our efforts to be very inclusive. For example, like, you know, kids with parents who already want to work from home, to try and accommodate their needs, you know, in advance of the pandemic. We already had a lot of these, like, you know, ways to communicate online. So one of the reasons we were able to adapt so fast are because we already had many of those things in place. So it was kind of, it was easy to communicate, still challenging, but everyone was very much up to the task to be able to pivot and, you know, really work on getting those collections in.
Thank you very much. Next question is for Vicent. It seems that you established valuable collaborations both as a requester and as a volunteer. Do you have the feeling that your interaction with Crowdfight was clearly asymmetrical? And by that I mean that you get help when you make a request and help when you participate as a volunteer? Or do you also feel that you benefited from the interactions you started as a volunteer?
Well, yeah, I think on my side, the interaction were symmetrical. So we both sides get benefit from the interaction. I have several examples, but many of the collaborators that we have contacted and interact with through the Crowdfight network are now active collaborator within our own project. So they are now included in our collaborative network, and they participate to new projects around retroviruses, for example. So they also, on their side, open new way for their own research, and they are now newly involved in additional projects that are currently under progress in our team. And on on our side, of course, we benefit from their skills, and we could develop those new projects around COVID and get those new data and new molecules. So really, in terms of benefits, for me, it was clearly equal and fully symmetric.
Great, thank you very much. I have a general question for all of you. How difficult was communication between two different science/skill cultures? Any issues with what another skill set was expected to bring versus what it brought in reality? So maybe I think maybe Fran can give us some insight into this.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the team, we all came really from very different backgrounds.
Right.
Although obviously Billy had, I don't know how many more other volunteers there were for this task, but he had picked people that presumably had some background, at least some molecular skills, or had forwarded him already some papers that they'd already found. So I guess he picked people that he thought would be well suited to the task. But yeah, we all had very, very different backgrounds, very different stages in our career, from PhD students up to professors, and Palmer's the director of her department. So people coming at the problem from very different angles. But what was nice about it was everyone just put their expertise in, and everybody was credited for their work, and I think that was really important. So we didn't exclude people. Billy had the last say on what was in the paper, but he very much stepped back in terms of the molecular biology, because he knew that he's a brilliant chemist, but he knew that we were bringing molecular biology expertise in, and I think it was very respectful. People understood that we had different expertises, and I have to say, probably one of the reasons I was a coordinator was because I was one of the only native English language speakers, and so while Billy decided on the final content of our reviews, although stepping back to acknowledge that we were the molecular biologists, I was also given free rein, if you like, to edit for English language and grammar and syntax and content and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have anything else to add? No, so I think we'll have one final question. It's also a broad question. Did anyone find that despite the different backgrounds that you all had, pretty much the same science of culture expectation, or was there process discussions along the way? Let me.
I don't think the question was very clear.
Yeah, did anyone find that despite the different backgrounds that you all had pretty much the same science of subculture expectation? So the question is, did anyone, despite all having the different backgrounds, did you all have the same science of culture expectation? Or did you have to define the processes along the way? Did you have some sort of commonality in the way you're working?
Well, maybe I can say something about that, because the answer is different depending on the collaborator, for example. Because if you, on my side, I'm coming from the academic background, and I had two kind of collaborator. I had academic collaborator, and I also had some contact with people from private companies, and of course the ideas or the aim of each collaborator can be different, because on the academic the idea was more to get the data and share the data very fastly to be able to propose that to the community, and that's the case for the model that we have developed. The idea was to share them very fastly, to be sure that they could be usable for the community. In the case of private companies that contact us for a request to test drugs using our system, the idea was more to find the good molecules and to patent them. But it's a more general difference between academic and private company, I guess. So it's not only in the case of Crowdfight interaction cases. So that's my experience in terms of interaction.
Great, thank you very much. Our time is up, so I want to thank all of you panelists for joining us today, and all of you who are attending the symposium. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. This is the last session of our symposium. And we have a roundtable in which we would like to discuss some issues that are going to be very important moving forward. And before presenting our panelists, I would like to give just a little bit of context. So the reason we're here is that our organization, Crowdfight, is changing very much. It used to be, our mission used to be to help a few researchers in a particular context by making connections between them and people who could help them. now it's shifting towards changing the scientific culture in the long term, towards a more collaborative science. Now we see our original aim as a method rather than the aim itself. And we don't really know how to do this. We are all scientists. We have thought a lot in our life about how to lead a research group, for example, or how to write a paper, but not about how to think about scientific culture, how to discuss about scientific culture, how to lead an organization. So what we have done is to invite people who come from organizations that are already being very successful in these directions. And we'd like to discuss the challenges that we face, the opportunities that we see with them. So thank you very much to all for being here. It's really great. And Alberto will introduce the panelists.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alberto Pascual Garcia. I am a researcher at ETH, and it is a great pleasure to me to introduce today to our panelists. We have Brian Nosek, who is a co-founder and executive director of the Center for Open Science and professor at the Department of Psychology at the University of Virginia. We have, hello, Brian. We have Benoit Giquel, who is Outreach and Business Development Manager at Agene. Welcome, Benoit. We have also Stuart King, who is a Research Culture Manager at eLife, which is perhaps best known for the journal, but he will talk us about many other things that this organization is doing. And we have Pandelis Perakakis, who is co-founder of Open Scholar and associate professor at the psychology department at the Universidad Complutense de Madrid. So welcome, everyone. To start, I would like to ask you to give us a very brief introduction, perhaps, of your organizations, and so we can a little bit learn from them. So perhaps, Brian, could you be so kind to start?
Yes, thank you, Alberto and Alfonso, for having me for this interesting conversation. The Center for Open Science is a nonprofit technology and culture change organization that has a mission to increase openness, integrity, and reproducibility of research. And we pursue that by building technology to make it possible to be open and make it easier to be open. We work on policy and bottom-up and top-down culture initiatives to try to change the incentives, the norms, and the policies promoting open research. And we conduct research on what the challenges are as they exist and whether the interventions that we and others pursue are working so that we can iteratively improve our processes to try to facilitate more open research. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Brian. We can perhaps continue with Benoit.
Hi, yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. And as I said, I already said that to you guys, but it was well organized so far, so congratulations. So yeah, I'm working for Agene. I'm an outreach and business development manager. And so you may already know Agene. Agene is a non-profit plasmid repository. It's been there for more than 15 years now. And the idea of Agene, the history is that Melina Fan, who was a PhD student in Harvard University, she struggled to just get free plasmid for her research. She asked the lab to get them, and she didn't have any answer. And she came up with this idea that it would be great to have a centralized repository where we have all the plasmid that have been created and published in the world. And so it started, as I said, more than 15 years ago, and now we just passed 100,000 plasmid in the repository. And so basically, our goal, our mission at Agene is to help scientists sharing their plasmid primarily, and we also have lentiviral and AAV particles, and in the near future, you will be able as well to get access to antibodies that are coming from labs that have created recombinant antibodies. So really our aim is to help scientists sharing their materials and in order for the community to have great tools, easy access to great tools for their research. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinod. Can I ask you, perhaps for those that are non-scientists in our audience, what is a plasmid?
It's plasmid. It's it's a great tool. It's a great molecular biology tool. Basically, it's a piece of DNA that you can use to express a protein in a setup in the cells, and so it's very useful for life science researcher.
Cool, thank you. So we can perhaps continue with Stuart.
Cool. Thank you very much, and hello everyone. Thanks also to the organisers for the invitation. It's been a real pleasure to learn more about Crowdfight today and to sort of hear how it's developing. So I'm Stuart King. I'm the Research Culture Manager at eLife. And to set the scene, eLife is a non-profit open access journal that publishes original research in biology and medicine. We've been doing that since 2012. And I've been with eLife since 2013, so not quite at the beginning, but for a while. Our mission is to accelerate discovery in science, and we do that by leveraging both the processes of peer review and publishing itself, as well as communities of researchers and of open source innovators, to recognize and encourage the most responsible behaviors in science. And for us, that means that by responsible, we're looking to recognize those behaviors that make research more open, more trustworthy, more inclusive, and more equitable. And yeah, the activities that we do, as hinted, we're more than a journal. So the thing that we're probably best known for is a publisher. We publish many papers now. I should have checked the numbers. But beyond that, we're also a community of 700 researchers who serve as our editorial board. We have an early career advisory group made of a very diverse group of researchers from graduate up to early PI stage who shape and guide pretty much everything that we do. We organize ambassadors schemes, which brings together communities of researchers to work on research culture change. And the other thing that we do is we have the annual 2-day innovation sprint, which brings together people from the open source communities to work on ideas that are in the space of transforming research communication and culture. So I think we're active in quite a few spaces there.
Thank you, Stuart. So our last panelist, please introduce.
Yeah. Hello, Alberto. Thank you and the Crowdfight team for this kind of invitation. It's exciting to see that you have plans to continue this amazing project. I had the opportunity to get to know about your platform because I asked for your collaboration for a COVID-related project during the lockdown. And it's nice to see that I was really impressed by both your organization and by the results. So it's nice to see that you have plans to continue, and I wish you the best. So Open Scholar in less than 5 minutes. So it started as an idea with a very small group of people, researchers, full-time university researchers back in 2006. And it formally was founded as an organization in 2012. The reason is because with this little group of people, we realized two things. First, that there is 3 fundamental processes of science: validation, evaluation, and dissemination. How we certify the quality of research, how we develop and use quantitative indices for career promotion, for example, or funding, and how we communicate these results. They all depend on academic journals who are mostly owned and managed by companies, by private companies. And of course, there's companies have an interest in profit, if they're for profit, or in their sustainability in case they're not for-profit companies. So it's easy to understand that when it comes to deciding how to organize these processes, these groups will prioritize their interests, either profit or sustainability. We were not the first, of course, to realize that there's a big conflict of interest there, but we also realized that we have the 2 basic elements that are needed to create a system that will handle these 3 processes in a more efficient, open, transparent, and also free-for-all way. And these 2 elements, first, we need infrastructure, and we realize that this infrastructure can be provided by universities. There are librarians and institutional repositories. Every university has a library, which with professional librarians who own, who manage the repositories, which could actually be publication platforms. And the second element is the voluntary work of our community, of the community of scholars. And this is also something that is not new to us, because many of us, for example, contribute in the development of open source software. We do it for free, voluntarily. And of course, not to mention the many hours that we spend for non-paid hours that we spend for peer review, for journal peer review. So if we bring, the idea is that if we bring these two elements together, the publishing infrastructure provided by public institutions and our voluntary work, we can create an alternative system. With this idea in mind, we started engaging the community of librarians, universities, scientific societies. In 2015, we received funding from the European Commission, and we created a module, an open peer review module that institutional repositories can use to offer peer review for any item hosted in their databases, in their repositories. We partnered with the institutional repository of the Spanish Research National Council, which installed this module and became the first repository to offer this kind of services. And since 2016, we collaborate with Confederation of Open Access Repositories, sharing the same vision to create a distributed network of institutional repositories that could become the main publishing platform to host the entire global research output in the future. So that's in a nutshell the idea of the organization.
Great, thank you, panelists. So I would like to start a little bit the discussion, talking, of course, about collaboration, no? And in particular, I think that non-scientists perceive science as a fundamentally collaborative endeavor, right? But I don't know if we as scientists agree on this perception, although we could say it is because we are standing on the shoulders of giants, right? So in a sense, we are, of course, collaborating with past research. But I would like to ask you if you think that science is as collaborative as it could be, and if not, which is the most important thing you would change if you could? So let me start perhaps with Stuart now.
Oh, it's a good question, obviously. That's why we're here. So I definitely think that science could be more collaborative. I think that's going to be not an uncontroversial opinion. I do think that the point you've made about how science is a process, how it builds on itself, there is that idea of sort of thinking about future people as collaborators, as people who will take the baton. That's a very interesting thing in science, and I think that definitely is one of the motivators around making sure that the scientific record is open and reproducible and really like has all the information there that that people could build on. The other part of the question around, yeah, how do we make it more collaborative, or how could it be more collaborative? I think one of the key sort of areas where I see where it seems that there's an unnecessary competition, and I'm going to talk about this, think about it as someone who works for a publisher, is around peer review itself. And the peer review process, which in some cases seems to pit reviewers and authors against each other, as sort of there's this combative process of trying to sort of take criticism to an extreme and sort of really sort of give authors a hard time, because that's how peer review is done, right? That's the process. And I think there's definitely scope there around how peer review could be made more collaborative, and I think that's sort of I didn't talk about it earlier, but there's the sort of areas that eLife has been active. So since the beginning, we've championed a consultative approach to peer review, where we get the reviewers and editors to all talk to each other and to really make those requests consolidate a consensus report, so the requests are coherent, complementary, and sort of not conflicting, and also reasonable, to make sort of reviewers hold themselves account to other people and the editor before they go to the authors. And I think that that's kind of something that sets a scene for making that process less competitive and seeing peer review and reviewers as more of the the idea of a critical friend, someone who says what needs to be said, but isn't saying it in a way that is outright non-constructive. So yeah, that's something I'd pick on.
Yeah, I think I can go. I have some ideas. No, I think that's. I mean, as Stuart said, I think we all agree that science should be more collaborative, and we can see that at Gene that we still have some people that don't want to share the materials, and I think we have to go that way. And what Alfonso was saying in the first session about that they were surprised that that the volunteer was adding value, and what they was doing, they were very valuable for the requester. And I think that a lot of scientists that they are creating things in their labs and they don't want to share, but if they are share those materials or even ideas, they would see that on the other side, it would be very valuable for others, and the science will go on. And for example, if we talk about plasmid, the tools that we're sharing, is that a lot of people are very surprised that their plasmid is requested by hundreds of labs. Without that gene, it might not have been possible. But if they didn't know, I mean, if the other people didn't know that they have this plasmid, there was no sharing and there's no value at the end of the chain. But by sharing the plasmid, then there is a value. What they have done is valuable for others. And I think that the science community should really realize this, that what they are doing is valuable for their research, but it's also very valuable for others.
Great, thank you. So perhaps Brian could also tell us a few words about this.
Yeah, I love both Stuart and Benoit's answers because I think they extend our concept of collaboration to the entire research lifecycle rather than the particular of, are we working together on this project and going to be co-authors together on a paper? And I think that's a really important part of thinking about how we can make leverage the collaborative enterprise of what makes science so robust. And just to build on both of their comments, one of the models of Stuart mentioning making the peer review process more collaborative, where we've seen lots of success, is in the registered reports publishing model. And the idea of registered reports is you do peer review before the experiments are done. So you have review on the research question and the design of the methodology that you're going to do to test that question. And then the reviewers give feedback there. And what dramatically changes, besides the impact on reducing publication bias and bias against negative results, lots of things about the quality and credibility of research. What happens in the peer review process in this model is that when I get the critical feedback from the reviewers about my design in a registered report, instead of saying, oh man, well, I can't do anything about it now because all the research is done, I say, oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to change my design to account for the expert reviews that I got. And it just totally changes the nature of the relationship between the reviewers and the authors. And in fact, informally, we see that everybody that's involved in the process talks about it like, this is how I imagine science to be. My feedback isn't just saying, here are all the terrible things about your research, wish you had thought of it. It's, here are some ideas that I think will make it better. And then with Benoit's point on that more effective material sharing, it just changes the nature of the potential impact of one's work. It's not just now, will you cite my paper and say, I found the thing? It really is, as you opened with, building on each other in a very substantive way. As material sharing just becomes more routinized. And there's lots of barriers to that, but groups like AdGene are really starting to change the way that works. So I think that's just so important. So, thank you.
So my understanding is that you guys are suggesting a little bit to make more visible different parts of the scientific process beyond the final outcome, no? So panelists, do you have any further
Yes, I yeah, I agree very much with what I've heard from the other panelists. I would add to that of course, collaboration is nice. I think we all scientists want to collaborate. It's part of our scientific nature, perhaps. But maybe there's a fine line when collaboration starts perhaps to feel as abuse rather than collaboration, and that's why, for example, I mentioned the open source software example, where it has thrived precisely because there's no conflict of interest, because everybody offers their work and there's nobody, the benefit is common for everyone. So I think collaboration is a natural tendency, perhaps for scientists, but there is under certain circumstances when you feel that there is trust, you can trust that your work is not going to be exploited. So that's why our focus is on bringing together groups that their only interest is the prosper of science, which are public institutions and individual researchers. And since we're talking about peer review, of course, collaboration in order to be able actually to participate in the process of peer review, as Stuart I think mentioned, openness and transparency, and Brian as well, in this process of review is essential. Otherwise, when the name, the identity of the reviewer is not disclosed, there is no actual collaboration there. It's even more this element of being, I'm using the word abuse, but perhaps it sounds hard, but it's the one that comes to mind. The feeling that you get abused by some journal in order to make decisions on behalf of editors, but then at the end there's some profit or some other interest behind your work. So I think to promote collaboration, the issue of trust is fundamental.
Cool. So then I identify from what you are saying now, like 3 points that in the process that typically are not discussed. One is, are there registered reports, for instance, that Brian has mentioned? Then sharing protocols is something that perhaps we do not, well, sharing in this case plasmids, right? More experimental materials. There is also the possibility of visualizing the peer review. No, these are things that are not, we do not talk much about. Which other points in the process do you think we could perhaps visualize? Anyone, please just jump in and answer the question if you think there is something else.
Well, just as an additional step on the down that path is the open sharing of data at the end. So the materials and protocols to generate the experimental data or otherwise, and then the sharing of that to improve both your ability to evaluate the reproducibility of my finding, also your ability to test its robustness to different analytic approaches to see if it's contingent on very specific decisions that I made. But then in terms of collaboration, it does collaboration at a distance. Me sharing data, you may have an entirely novel use of it that I would never have thought of. And the ability to aggregate data, if we can develop good standards at the level of the individual data points themselves, changes the nature of what kinds of follow-up secondary analysis is possible. So all of it, I think, the examples of transparency is both to elevate the ability to reuse and leverage the work that is done, and then also to really help to foster that self-corrective enterprise, because science is a social system, and all of that self-corrective work, like Pendelis was talking about in terms of peer review, is for facilitating that conversation. You can't have a productive conversation without being able to see how it is each of us arrived at the claims that we're making.
Yes, please.
Yeah, exactly. An excellent point by Brian. Visualize the process also of data, to have access to the data. In fact, we envision a review process where reviewers actually not only evaluate a piece of paper, which is the manuscript, but actually have access to the data and the code, and they can even replicate at least some parts of the analysis. So that their reviews are more useful actually as replications of methods and analysis. But this, of course, in order to put this amount of work in a review, you need proper attribution. That's where we go back to this issue of incentives. But exactly as Brian said, opening up as many parts of the process can only benefit the final outcome, which should be rigorous, sound methodological, sound science. Yeah.
What about perhaps the experimental materials? Benoit, you are talking now about sharing, for instance, antibodies. Which other gaps do you think could be tackled in the way in which I think you are doing, which I think it's innovative?
What do you mean exactly? What
yeah, you are now having a library of plasmids. I can think then you are planning to develop another library of antibodies. I could think about developing a library of strains, let's say. So which other materials do you think could be shared?
Yeah, I mean, on paper, I would say everything should be or could be shared. Then we talk about logistics. So, for example, plasmids, it's easy to share because this piece of DNA you can just put it on a piece of paper, or you can put it into water tube and then send it to everybody in the world. It's easy. So I would say that the different sometimes it's the logistics. It's where the people are not sharing the things. Even plasmid that are very easy to share. You have some people that have issues to share with people in other countries because of customs issue that you can get, because we're talking about live tools. So this can be difficult, but yeah. Other than that, I think that it would be good if people could just share everything that they have created. And to go back to what we were saying before, as was saying Pandelis, is that at Agin, for example, we are sharing this plasmid, and Agin didn't create those tools. Those tools have been created by other labs, and often in publication, people are saying, "Oh, I got these tools from Agin," and we are trying hard to let people know, no, we didn't do anything. We just did the logistic between one lab and another lab, and we are trying hard to let them know that they have to tell in their publication that this plasmid tool is coming from another lab, and cite the lab, and so then the lab would be, you can see really what it's coming from, and I think that we need to have this kind of bring everything, all the information, all the data there, and so the people can know exactly where it's coming from and not coming from us, for example.
Stuart, do you have anything to add, maybe?
Yeah, so I was just sort of thinking of what Benoit just said there about making sure that people are really getting the credit for the recognition for their contributions. And so small thing that eLife does is that we ask authors to provide a key resources table, which essentially provides the provenance and the citations for all the key reagents, plasmids that they're using. And I'm going to make a mental note to check that doesn't just say Agin, that it does say where it should be. But it kind of also made me think about other things that publishers can do, and that I know that eLife is doing, is just being more transparent around the contributions of the individual authors, and using things like the credit taxonomy to show the different contributions that people are making, rather than just providing the rather opaque author list in which the order needs to be divined by the reader to work out who did what, with everyone has a different assumption about what that means. Just collect that information, share that information, allow people who want to make decisions on that thing, so institutions and funders and all these people who are sort of looking for better metrics, looking for a better sort of understanding. I think publishers have a lot of this information and they could just make more of it public. So yeah, they're using the credit taxonomy to really disambiguate author lists is easy. It's the thing we do. The other thing is, going back to that peer review and talking about the transparency of peer review reports, is just make make that publicly available. Don't take that in complex process of peer review to improve a manuscript and boil it down to the decision of whether or not this paper gets published here or must go somewhere else and for the process to repeat. Make all of that open. And that's, again, one of the big changes at eLife at the moment is we're transitioning to a publish then review model where we'll be exclusively reviewing preprints. And what we'll be doing is using peer review to create public reports, public reviews of those preprints for everything that we review. So I think that's the potential to really just sort of, this work is going on, and comments about how it's labor that scientists give to produce these reports, produce these reviews. Publishers should share that, should give people the ability to get credit for that. And I'd like to see that happening more, I think.
We have a question from the audience, which actually I think brings up an interesting topic that we typically don't see interacting with collaboration. So someone is asking, do you think that the precariousness and temporality in the academic career have an impact on how collaborative science is? Do you have any thoughts? To me, this is a hard one because it's not something I have thought about, right? Science is precarious and we would like to collaborate more, but the interaction between these two.
I would say that it's this is directly related to an incentive system. Like this public pressure to publish is partly the reason of this precariousness. Like it's increasingly hard for young researchers to enter the scene of to prosper in their academic careers, because in my day, when I got my PhD with 3 or 4 papers, it was fine, you know, to get to defend your PhD with 3 or 4 papers. Now we see people with 40 or 50 papers, which is absolutely ridiculous, and it gives you an idea about the quality of this work. But this is how it is now, because we are measuring science by the numbers. So I don't know if this answers any question, but it's just an idea that finally collaboration is, these things are all linked, you know, how we evaluate and how we communicate science, what are the incentives. Brian said that they're making efforts also top down to try to change the incentives from the point of view of funding agencies. So these are all very important issues.
Yeah, I think we should definitely move on incentives, right? I think it's a key question, and we are talking about developing new products, let's say, new ways to visualize our work. So perhaps we could start talking a little bit about this. Alfonso, would you be willing to ask some questions?
Yeah, so actually I was, because it caught my attention something that Stuart said. Because so there seems to be some kind of divide between what we could call like post-publication collaboration, in which I publish a paper, someone will use that, and pre-publication collaboration, where we collaborate through a paper. And actually, I was wondering if the key difference is actually the incentive and the documentation of the process, in the sense that once I publish something, then I have the authorship. So I have an incentive to publish it because it will be recognized. While the generous, say, part of collaboration and the personal part of collaboration comes before. And I'm wondering actually if now we are thinking, oh, we should give new incentives for people to collaborate in different ways, but then perhaps as soon as we create the incentives, then it doesn't feel generous anymore, right? Because then maybe it doesn't even feel like a collaboration anymore, because we're again packaging little pieces of work so that people can use them in different ways. And actually, so maybe my first question about incentives, I guess I'm thinking about Stuart because of the publication, but maybe, I mean, is whether you see any tension in this divide, in the sense that we are somewhat worried that emphasizing informal collaboration pre-publication is going to remove some stress from making things well at the end, from, for example, publishing a paper with extremely high standards for openness and reproducibility, right? Because, oh, if somebody else needs to reproduce my data, they will ask for my help to reproduce it, and then I don't need to be so careful while publishing the paper. So my first question would be whether you see any tension in this.
Sorry, struggling to find the unmute button there. Who had that on their bingo card? So the question about, yeah, the tension around the incentives. I don't think that by sort of encouraging more sort of collaboration, or those really early stages of collaboration around just extra, like providing, as you were doing, providing sort of help with specific problems. I don't see that as competing with the end of the process, where at the end of the process, if you think of it from publication, of here is a paper that meets standards to be either published in a journal or endorsed by a journal or endorsed by a society or whatever that means in a model where, say, for example, we're talking about reviewing preprints rather than publishing papers. But there are definitely there are tensions, and the tensions are related to the earlier comment about the precariousness of careers and competition. I don't think it's necessarily that it's the inherent precariousness and the competition that's the problem. It's the criteria on which people are being judged. If the key areas here where the big decisions are made are funders and institutions, and I think the criteria they're looking for are fully essentially being devolved to publishers in terms of, okay, well, I need to know that they've published enough in the right journals, and that's my decision criteria. That's where the problem is. It needs to be, we consider publishers, like I said already, can do more to provide more information for the other things that those decision makers need to know. Peer review can surface that, and we're trying to sort of make the process more useful for those specific use cases. But I think it also comes down to just rethinking the criteria in which people are judged. And I think the encouraging thing here is that we are seeing it happening. And I think the words research culture, the word science culture, are kind of really giving people the idea that this is a complex, interconnected system that will take many different stakeholders coming together or working in different ways to see that change. But like I said, we are seeing it. So I'm thinking of institutions in the UK that I know of. So the University of Glasgow are doing great stuff in research culture and completely sort of shaping their promotion and evaluation criteria for their researchers around their own values. They're really recognizing that the metrics that have been relied on in the past are poor proxies for the things they actually want to be measuring. So things like collaboration in the form of collegiality, so internal with colleagues, and openness, and all the things that we recognize as important, they're putting it into practice. They've moved from let's talk about it to let's do it. And I know that there are other places are doing it. And in terms of funding, again, UK, the Wellcome Trust are really hugely active here, doing huge amounts of surveys, doing huge amounts of reshaping what they're doing. And I think that that's where those tensions will lessen when the people who have the power and are kind of shaping those incentives start to recognize that and start to shift. So yeah, I think I want to be hopeful about this, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think Stuart highlighted the major challenges here in terms of the research culture and the incentives. The opportunity that we have is that when you ask researchers what their values are, there is a pretty high degree of consensus on some core values of transparency, sharing, openness, collaboration, and pretty high consensus on frustration with the system of rewards that exists right now. And back to what Pandelis was mentioning earlier, right? The publication is the currency of advancement. And the problem is partly that that's the case, but it's really two-dimensional. We're never going to get rid of it entirely for the simple reason that the paper is how we communicate about our research. And so there's some rationality to it being a unit of evaluation for what people are contributing in the system. The problem is that it's the singular way that people advance in the system. So some of the other examples in what we were discussing before are mechanisms to diversify the basis of credit. I should get credit for sharing data. I should get credit for sharing my materials, plasmids or otherwise. I should get credit for doing peer review and being a good evaluator of research, not just producer of research. And then the second dimension is changing the criteria for what it takes to get that publication. And that's right now so focused on getting those amazing, exciting, novel results that it creates all of those dysfunctional pressures that people have been talking about for what I have to do good work in my lab. If instead we alter the criteria so that it's really about designing, asking important questions and doing good, rigorous methodology to test those questions, then the results are the results. That's just what we learn from the process of doing good work. So if we can shift both of those dimensions, we won't eliminate competition, but we will align it more closely with why people are doing science in the first place.
So the paper, because as you very well say, it's still the unit of measurement, and there are many good reasons for that. So the next question we have is the author list, which is just an ordered list of people, which seems like a ridiculous way to distribute credit. Then you have this ordered list, then you have a cliff between being an author and not being an author, right? It's crazy. I mean, we are scientists. We should be doing things rationally. So why do you think it's such a successful system to, or well, I don't know if successful, I mean, pervasive system to evaluate scientists? And why do you think it's so hard to change? Because so there are alternatives like the credit taxonomy, but maybe you disagree with this. The impression is that these things are very slowly making progress, if at all. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe you have a different impression that the progress is more bad. So that's the question. Why do you think it's so hard to change this?
Maybe because it has been there for a long time. I mean, I mean, I did a PhD and 3 postdocs. It's been almost 10 years that I moved from academia, and I have the feeling that it's still the same. And I started my career as a researcher almost 20 years ago, and I have the feeling that it was the same at the time and still continuing. I think that, and in terms of global, I would say science culture, you still have the feeling sometimes that the researcher are doing or applying what their boss were doing, you know, and not trying to change. And I think that is the same there. And the institution are always using the same system to evaluate the researchers. I mean, I did my PhD. I finished it in 2006, and it was in France. And to have my PhD, I should have had several papers and at least one first author paper, you know. And so it was putting a lot of pressure on the PhD student to have this first author paper and everything, where you can have more collaborative work and have 10 papers that where you are second, third, or I don't know where you're part of the team. And I think for me will be more valuable, and but the system is still doing. And I think that I don't, you can tell me, Alfonso, that now that you work in France, I think it's the same system. It's still the same system in France. All the university are asking for this first author paper for the PhD student, so they can pass their viva and have their diploma. So I think first of all we have to change this in the university in the first, because basically it's your PhD is your first experience as a researcher, as a project manager, and already we give you a culture of you have to be better than the PhD student that is next door, you know, instead of trying to collaborate. So I think that we really have to change this at the early stage of the career.
Yeah, just to build on what Benoit is saying, I think the key challenge for why it's so hard to change is that it's fundamentally a coordination problem. No one actor in the system can change the system. And so any actor that changes takes on inordinate risk because of the way the system operates now. So if I say to my grad students, you know what, we're not playing the system as it's played. We're going to play the way we think science should be done. Those students take on risk. Will I be able to have a job and keep a job in the field? Because I don't know if others around me will change as well. Any one funder has those challenges, right? Even though they hold the money and you think, oh, they just change. Nevertheless, they exist in a system and have their own constraints and incentives and reinforcements. Any university administrator has to address the fact that the policies they apply across a variety of different disciplines that may have very different expectations about how change occurs. So everybody is under constraint. And so any effective change has to address the coordination problem to help manage the change so that everybody in all of the different stakeholders is brought along together. Now, on the flip side, the very positive thing is that lots of researchers are idealists. They're in science because they believe in particular ideals. And if science doesn't live up to those ideals, they're willing to leave and go do something else where they can make productive use of their time. So those are the change agents, right? Those individual actors who are willing to be progressive ahead of where the culture is to demonstrate that it's possible, to demonstrate that it can be done well, and to start to shift the norms so that other people can say, oh, wow, I didn't realize you could do it that way. Maybe I can too. Maybe it isn't as risky as I thought. And the stakeholders can really pay attention and use them as inspiration.
Just before I express my opinion, an anecdote about what you mentioned about the author, the order of the author list. There's a culture in economics to use alphabetical order for the authors. So I remember finding myself in a ridiculous situation trying to convince an evaluation committee that they should not evaluate some of my papers that were in collaboration with economists based on the order of the authors, because I was always appearing last. But this was totally irrelevant to the contribution of the papers. It was just alphabetically because that's how they do it. So, but it was impossible, of course, to change the norms. But just one anecdote to show how ridiculous the system can be, the evaluation system can be. And then it's about how I totally agree with the vision of Brian, that it's a complex problem, it's a complex system. One aspect that I insist that there are vested interests. I insist that some of the things don't change because they are protecting interests of some of the parties involved in the system. So, for example, we were mentioning why do the open access was the first problems that the scientists realized 20 or 30 or 40 years earlier, that it's not rational to pay for access for something that we produced. And so the whole open access movement, I don't need to discuss about that now. So, but this is just an example. Then other aspects of how we do science are also influenced by, for example, evaluation. It's to the interests of journals to be evaluated based on journal brands and prestige of journals. So on their side, they will not, they will fight any attempt to change the system because it's to their benefit. My hope, of course, idealist scientists, they can play an important role. I agree with Brian, but also my hope is with funders. I'm seeing now in the last year, some very strong, important funders like taking very important steps, creating their own platforms, making mandates and pushing towards a direction that it's more rational, no? Both for evaluation, for communication, for all these fundamental processes of science. So I'm hoping that maybe change can come from there. At the same time, of course, scientists have to be alert and have to be, whenever something like pre-registration is a wonderful idea, we have to support it. Open data, open code, these are wonderful ideas towards the right direction. We have to support them. Open peer review, all of these things. It's not just enough that they're being introduced from the top. We also have to support them from the bottom. So, but hopefully, as Brian said, we have to find a coordination between the different elements. And my hope is that this can start maybe, or can get some momentum from the side of the funders.
Yeah, actually, there is someone in the chat saying that if you watch movie credits, recall that until Star Wars came out, credit was not given to everyone all in the films. And I'm wondering who is Star Wars in science, right? But definitely there are two things we should think about. One is, okay, we create these different dimensions, right? More dimensions. Let's create more dimensions so we can evaluate our activity in many more ways. But in the end, are we proposing to accumulate digital object identifiers for many different tokens? How could, which may make sense, no? But we then face the challenge on how to evaluate the quality of these tokens. How can we start thinking, no? Or integrating this information into metrics, no? Because in the end, the evaluators, what we'll need is to create metrics, unfortunately, but it is how it works. Do you have experience with new products, let's say, in which you are already generating, for instance, digital objects, and how this could be integrated in the evaluation process? Yes, Pandelis?
Very briefly, for our peer review module, we collaborated with an artificial intelligence group in Barcelona who helped us build a reputation system based on weighted averages of the evaluations of reviewers and authors, and so kind of complex system that we could end up with quantitative metrics both for individual papers, for authors, and for reviewers, which in my opinion was far better than just using the name of a journal or the impact factor of a journal. But the idea is that we should let science decide also this as well. So if we want better metrics, don't wait for Clarivate Analytics or Thomson Reuters or whoever to come up with the secret algorithm that will solve our problems. We should put this problem on the table and find the solution. And probably we won't get it right in the beginning, but that's what we're good at, to solve problems. So let's do it collectively again. Let's solve this problem collectively.
I agree with that. And then just one example, I think, of ways to change the system to deal with the fact that, oh, we have to evaluate many more things now. Doesn't that get more complicated? Stuart's example of eLife moving to evaluating preprints and having open review could have long-term effects of dramatically changing the efficiency of the peer review process. Because what happens now, right? Right now, I get my paper, I send it to the A+ journal, it gets rejected. Those reviewers spend the time. Then I send it to the A journal, it gets rejected. Then I send it to the B+ journal, it gets rejected, right? I go down the hierarchy of journals until I finally get it in. And I've used 20 reviewers' time on the same paper, just trying to get the advancement that I need. If you flip the order and it's published and then evaluated, then you dramatically reduce the burden of peer review, and you open it up to get actual variety of experts weighing in at different stages in the process. So there's so much potential innovation in how it is we do review, how it is we aggregate those evaluations, and as Pandela says, how we evaluate which ones are effective and not, that we're really just at the onset of a meta-science movement to really understand these systems. And I think it's going to be a very exciting, next decade in actually seeing what we can generate when we're deliberate about it, rather than the current system, which we just sort of stumbled into, and here it is.
So about this coordination game that we need to change, one question that we have is, so there are basically two, well, two main ways to fight against this coordination or change the coordination. One is through action, and this is the one probably we are choosing most of our organizations. So we provide a service that makes something better, gives a better alternative, even within the current context, that we hope will shift the game towards a better equilibrium, or through advocacy. One can try to convince people to change their behavior. And my question is, what do you think is the right equilibrium between these two? Would you say that, yeah, which one should get the most emphasis? Would you say that only action is enough, only advocacy is enough? Do you think they should be both mixed in the same organization, or different organizations should be dedicated to each of them?
Sorry, before you ask, guys, I should thank Brian, but he has to unfortunately leave us now at 7. So a great thank Brian for being with us, and all the best for your project.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. I'm sorry I have to go early. It's been a fabulous discussion. So please send all the notes to me after. I'm curious to hear the remainder. But thanks,
Great.
everybody.
Thank you so much,
Brian. Bye.
I could go on that question. So the question about the balance or the equilibrium between advocacy and action. I think with most things, yeah, both. I think so. As I said earlier, I'm really hopeful around the idea of the increasing recognition of that this is a research culture problem, that it is a interconnected, complex system that needs a holistic view. I think that the potential for that has really kind of brought people who are invested and motivated in changing things, but maybe felt that they couldn't previously, to kind of actually go, okay, well, what can we do? And we're seeing organizations who are just saying, well, these are the things we're trying, these are the actions we're taking. So they're doing both. They're doing the actions and they're telling people about them. So I think you are seeing things from funders who are changing things, institutions, I gave some examples earlier, right down to individual researchers who are making vows to only publish open access, to not review for profit journals that they disagree with the sort of business model behind. And I think through that combination of leading by example, sort of the idea of leadership as the thing, I think whilst leading by example is key, and then telling people about what you're doing shows that, well, I'm trying this is working, this isn't working, this is the effect. Taking that first step, I think more people will follow, and that's definitely something that I've tried to help eLife do within a publishing space, as well as following others when they are taking those first steps and showing alternative ways. I think it just takes both of those things.
I think like advocacy and action, that have to be all together to have the same goals. But I would say that to what I said before, where you start your career in science, and basically you're in the university, then you arrive in science, you have in a science lab, and then you discover that this science culture is where you have your first experience. And I think that advocacy on PhD student or master student there, and showing them that things can be done differently. And so, for example, I know that a lot of conferences now are dedicated some session about open science, and this is open to PhD students and postdoc, and it's to really to show them that outside their institution, maybe their institution is still doing the same thing and is not going to open science and more collaborations and more sharing their materials. But when they are at a conference, they can see that others are going that way, and I think that it's where you can really put them in their mind that they can do science differently, and that they are used to in their own lab. And I think that I think it would be a good way to educate them. I know that for my own experience that I was in that culture of competition in the lab, and I would have been happy to have other people telling me, hey, you can do science differently, and not always being in competition with other people outside. So I think we should also go that way.
I would like to ask you if you have any experience on the top-down approach, no? Because of course we all have the possibility, no, of creating projects as we are doing and try to change the culture and doing very little things. But how can we press the politicians, the funders? What could we do as scientists? No, we all know that the strike of scientists do not have much impact typically. So what things do you think we could do in this aspect? Do you have any experience on that? Yes, please, Sandrine.
Yeah, go on, Benoit.
No, it was just saying that as a French, I would say go on strike, but I did it back in the time when I was a PhD student, because at that time, for example, it was about salary of PhD student that was very low at that time in France, but it didn't work, so I got frustrated after that.
Yeah. Still, we have to try whenever we have the chance. Go on strike. I'm with you. But I was going to say something else. It's on the record, but but I will say it anyway. So yeah, my experience was like when I was young and foolish, and I thought that maybe the world can change like easier than. I still think that it can change, but not so easy as I thought. So back then, I tried even the top-down approach, and I found myself in Brussels talking with politicians, and their response. I had two encounters with. European consultants of European ministers, and the response was clear: lobbying by the publishers. They can't do anything, so it's not, their hands are tied. And what do you do with that? So that's why we soon abandoned the top-down approach, and we tried to do what we could as individual scientists and grouping together in larger groups, and of course advocacy, but not at that high level, but at like participating in events like this one and many others, mostly in Europe. But yeah, that was my experience, as you asked, Alberto, from the early years when we thought that we can influence at the top level.
Alberto, you're muted.
You're muted, Alberto.
Yeah, I would like also to ask you directly, Stuart. I'm sorry for that, but eLife has very strong funders behind, no? Well, actually, it was created by funders. So how do you perceive within an organization such as eLife the possibilities that we scientists have to interact with these funders and change things?
So eLife's history, I didn't cover that. Is that we. The idea of eLife came from a meeting between three funders, so Howard Hughes Medical Institutes in the States, Max Planck and Wellcome in Europe, looking at how to improve publishing, how to make peer review less painful, and actually leverage digital, because at that point the focus was open access. Open access movement wasn't moving quickly enough. Funders were fed up with having to fund researchers to access the work they'd paid for in the first place. So that's where eLife came from, and eLife came with the mandate of to do things differently, to innovate, to experiment, and having the backing of funders gave us a fairly initially secure position to do that. But the specific question about feeding up, influencing those above. My thinking is that there are different levels. I'm sort of missing the point, but within institutions, like you have contact and influence within your institution, within the organizations that you're part of. So our researchers our editors are all researchers, and they can influence us through the mechanism we have where our editor or board feed into the actions we're taking. We've recently launched specific working groups around key issues that we as an organization are looking to influence change, and doing that in a way that's really trying to build in that bottom up approach into within eLife as well. I would also say that, again, this is an area where I'm less familiar, but researchers serve as reviewers on grant panels all the time, and there's chances to influence smaller decisions and decisions as part of the process, and to sort of really just take that idealistic principles and go, right, well, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to make these decisions in the way that feels right, and recognize that even if you aren't the person at the top making the decision, there are points where influence can be exerted. And I'm not saying that it'll always work. I think there's, as with all things, and if being a researcher is anything, it's getting used to things not working. But I think that doesn't mean that people shouldn't try, and people are trying. And I think that's kind of going back to my idea of why I'm hopeful about this.
Alberto, you're muted.
Sorry. So just to finish this roundtable, because it's getting late, I would like to ask you one thing we are trying in Crowdfight, which is to involve the non-scientists in science. I think it's important, and there are many people that can do things in science in these projects, and we are now really trying to move this branch of Crowdfight. So, which things do you think could be done? And just if you have any experience on this, it would be great if you can share it.
May I?
Yes.
There's a concept you probably are aware of that, citizen science. So a whole movement of trying to involve citizens in like non-scientists in science. And we tried this kind of project during the pandemic, actually. So we asked people to report events, the emotional or psychological events they were going through. And the idea of citizen science is that there are many things that citizens can do to offer, for example, provide data, but they also have to get something in return. I think this is very important in order to engage people. No, so again, it's more, people will be more reluctant to offer something if they don't get anything back. For some people, just the pleasure of helping out scientists may be enough. But usually in citizen science projects, you're expected to offer something. This may be just information, like a feedback, like keep them involved in the project by giving them regular feedback about how the project evolves, or find other ways where they can feel that they learn or that they actually participate in this process, and they're not just elements or tools for the scientists. And I'm aware of very nice, very interesting citizen science projects in other areas, not psychology, which is my field. Volunteers making astronomical observations with their amateur telescopes, but covering large parts of the sky that like big telescopes they don't have access to. So just to name an example, or people cultivating in their gardens seeds and sending the results to botanists and geologists to process the data. So things like that are quite common within these frameworks, and I think it's very interesting if you'd like to move towards this direction. I'm not sure I can at the moment give some very specific advice, but this is what comes to mind when you think about involving citizens and the scientific process.
Yes, I don't know if we will answer the question, but at Agin, in order to help scientists share the materials, we are working closely with the universities or the institution that in terms of protecting these materials. So we have the plasmid are protected by the material transfer agreement, and this basically we are in contact with the tech transfer office within the university, and most of them know a little bit about science, but they are not scientists. And often we are talking to them and explain what is a plasmid, what is made for, and the benefit of their researcher to share this material to other researchers. And we're doing a lot of work there, because without them as well, they can just, even if the scientist is willing to share the materials, the institution can say no, because we want maybe to make to have a patent on it, or to make profit with these materials, where for some materials it's okay, but it's difficult to patent a plasmid and then to make money out of it. So we're working with them. It's a bit of education about this, and so then at the end, some of them are happy with that. Some other are still not happy with that gene, but yeah, we're contacting them and try to make it work for the benefit of the labs.
Okay, so we still have a ton of interesting questions written, but I guess we should be wrapping up. So thank you so much for the participation. It's been
Alfonso. Yeah, I just saw the chat now, and I see something very interesting. Maybe just a brief comment about that. Transparency of scientific culture, subculture. Yeah, culture or subculture. How about transparency of scientific subculture? So yeah, this is very interesting, because my experience is that when you talk to outsiders, to people who are not involved in science, about how scholarly communication is organized, think about opaque peer review and closed access, having to pay twice or three times for scientific, like how the taxpayers' money actually are being moved in this system. They really don't believe that. I mean, it's so irrational that they don't believe that it's actually the case. And I think it would be very interesting to make like a coordinated effort to expose our our system and see how people react, because people trust science, people trust scientists to solve, you know, the humanity's big problems, but they don't know how we work. They think that when they see something, you know, that the preprint scandal, no, that journalists, they took preprint articles as published, so they regarded them as published, and the audience, the people, the public didn't know that there's a difference between preprint. Of course, how would they know? But even if it is published, and even in a reputable journal, they don't know that it's just been reviewed by 2 or 3 people who we don't know who they are. So the public doesn't know that, and I think they deserve to know, because it's their money, it's their planet, it's their future, and they put their trust in us. And I think coordinating an effort to make this process, this culture or subculture public, could help accelerate things. Maybe people who are not related to science, they step in and say, maybe we can't change because we're within the system. But maybe somebody outside will come and say, seriously, this is the way you're doing things? You're not allowed to do that anymore. And I don't know, maybe the solution can come from outside, but at least if this for this to happen, we have to let them know. So it's okay to publish these things in academic journals about, you know, complain about or suggest alternatives, but how about going out in big to the wide audience in journals, not academic journals, and making public our system. So just an idea inspired by this comment.
I couldn't agree more. I think it would improve science. I think it's inherently interesting for people to understand how messy science is. I think it would be great if we made that outreach effort. Yeah. So as I was saying, unfortunately, we need to finish. So thank you again. For us, at least for me, this has been a great conversation. I think it's great to see how deeply you have all thought about these questions. And I think we go with very good ideas about what needs to be done to I would say, visualize this value that needs to be visualized so that we all have the right incentives to collaborate more. So yeah, thank you very much. And now I think Maria will make the final remarks for the symposium. Before she speaks, I would like to tell everyone how, so I'm sure will thank everyone who did the effort, but I would like to thank specifically Maria, who has been the heart of the symposium, as Sara said in the first session, the pump that has given energy to the whole process. So thank you very much, Maria, for making this happen.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, great discussion about science in general. Thank you to all the panelists for accepting our invitation and for your time. And thanks to Alfonso and Alberto for the moderation. Okay, so we are going to finish now the first symposium of Crowdfight. Thank you so much for your participation. We hope you have enjoyed this as much as we do. We remind you that we have recorded these presentations and it will be available on our YouTube channel. And during the symposium and previously, we have received amazing questions and great feedback. Unfortunately, we did not have enough time to address all the questions. However, we can continue the discussion on Slack. In fact, it has already started. And we have opened a Slack workspace of the symposium where we will answer all the questions. And we will be also available for you in Slack in case you have further questions. For those who have already registered for the symposium, we will send you an invitation to join Slack and more details via email. If there is someone who has not registered yet, you can still do it. The registration form is still open. Just enter your email there and you will get any updates. Also, stay tuned for the lottery of the Crowdfight Max. We will give away among all the participants of our YouTube chat. And we will soon announce the winner on our Twitter account and on our website in the symposium section. And then we will contact the winners. Well, if you want to support Crowdfight, you should, of course, just join us at crowdfight.org, but you can also do other things. We have just set up a system to accept donations, so you can make one from our web. And even if you don't win one of our Macs, we will send you one if you make a donation. You can also give us feedbacks and ideas through our Slack channel. And you can also tell people about us. That's maybe the single most important thing that you can do. If you meet someone who needs our help, tell them that we exist. If you meet someone who could join our community, tell them to come. In short, tell everyone that science can be made in a different way. And to finish, we would like to especially thank all the panelists and moderators for making this event awesome. Personally, I would also like to thank all the organizers, Sara Arganda, Ara Morán, Cristian González, Alberto Pascual, Alfonso Pérez, and Paco Romero. The last one is behind the scenes. He has been in charge of all the informatic parts during the symposium, so great job, guys. And thanks so much to all of you for your attention, and we hope to continue growing as a helpful platform for researchers. Maybe see you at the second symposium of Crowdfight next year. Let's see. Thank you so much. Bye.